There we go. Good morning. I'm Robert White, council member at large and chair of the Committee on Housing. Today is Thursday, May 2nd, 2024, and the time is 9:16 a.m. I'm calling to order this final budget oversight hearing in this committee, which will cover three agencies: the Rental Housing Commission, the District of Columbia Housing Finance Agency, and the Office of the Tenant Advocate. Each of these agencies plays a unique role in the district's housing ecosystem. The Rental Housing Commission serves as an appellate body for certain landlord and tenant cases. The Office of the Tenant Advocate offers information to tenants about their rights and provides legal and technical support. And the Housing Finance Agency funds affordable housing projects and administers several homeownership programs. The total proposed budget for all three of these agencies combined is over $22 million. This is slightly up from last year, but it also includes a 6% decrease in the budget to support tenants. As I've said at our other hearings, the sacrifices that I see in the mayor's proposed budget, like this cut to OTA, aren't really shared. They all seem to fall on the lower income residents. Cuts across the budget to civil legal services in particular will result in many more families facing eviction and poor housing conditions without support. As one of these legal service providers, OTA plays a critical role in curbing abuses in our housing market. Reduced affordable housing funding across the budget will also continue inequity in housing for many years to come. While the Housing Finance Agency has been successful in financing affordable housing, we just heard that our DHCD hearing last week about how the bond cap has limited momentum on housing preservation and production. Taken together, these changes will make the district less equitable and directly result in more people facing housing crises, ending up in shelters or being displaced from the district entirely. To try to refocus our agencies and this committee on priorities, I've asked each agency this budget season to provide three SMART goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Today will be no different. I look forward to hearing each agency's priorities. If we can stay focused, we can build a better way forward so our neighbors can do the same for themselves. We have a short public witness list today, and I'm going to call those witnesses now. We've posted a witness list on the council's hearing management system website, which you should have received from my staff ahead of this hearing. If you're a registered witness and are here in the room, please listen closely for your name. If you indicated that you plan to participate virtually but are here in person instead, please let my team know at the side of the dais over there. For witnesses joining over Zoom, when I call your name, the committee staff will promote you from attendee to panelist. You'll see a pop-up on your screen, and you'll need to accept the promotion to join the panel. You'll then drop out of the Zoom momentarily and will come back on as a panelist. Public witnesses will have 4 minutes to testify, and advisory neighborhood commissioners will have 5 minutes. We've asked agencies to keep testimonies to 10 minutes. Next, we will hear from each of our three government witnesses here today. First, let me call our public witnesses. Terry Terrain, Rochelle Ellison, Director of People for Fairness Coalition, Irene Jacobs, Policy Manager at the Black Swan Academy, Makisha Simpson, Public Witness, and Commissioner Trupti Patel from ANC 2A. Not all of our public witnesses are with us this morning, I believe. Makisha Simpson, looks like you are with us. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. You can begin your testimony. Welcome.
Yes, I am Makisha Simpson. I'm calling in behalf because I am one of the people that are part of the 2,000 families that is part of the DHS program. And so from what I'm understanding, I've been homeless for 3-4 years now. And in that process, I have finally received help through DHS, and now I'm in the process of being extended from the program and exiting the program. So I'm one of the following families that have been trying to get assistance through housing, HUD, everything. And I still haven't been able to achieve the right assistance that I need in order to just stay in DC and live properly for me and my family. It's a struggle here. Homeless is a great and horrible experience to have to deal through that. Like, I try to get assistance every day, and I have not yet until 2022, and now it's 2024, and I'm one of the families that have to leave. And I'm just trying to understand why, when I've been struggling for 3-4 years, being homeless just to achieve some type of assistance, and now it's getting cut off.
I appreciate you being with us. I'm going to come back to you with some questions. Will you be able to hang on for a few minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Irene Jacobs with the Black Swan Academy.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Irene Jacobs. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I am a clinical child psychologist with a specialization in youth risk and resilience, and I'm testifying on behalf of the Black Swan Academy. The Black Swan Academy youth have their current campaign that is entitled "We All Rise When Black Youth Thrive." This agenda was created in collaboration with middle and high school youth in order to raise the unique concerns of Black youth living in the District of Columbia. The current agenda aims to create positive systemic change through public policy and youth organizing at the local level. One of the items which I would like to discuss today is our campaign item titled "Where Dreams Come Home." This is where youth are calling for you all to ensure that youth and their families see investment into quality and affordable housing where repairs are made in a timely manner. Often overlooked, but especially are vulnerable in housing challenges, are our youth. In DC, it is estimated that 1 in 5 youth are experiencing housing insecurity. Black residents comprise 41% of the city population, yet over 2/3 of Black residents are facing housing insecurity. Structural racism leading to economic disadvantage has placed Black DC families in a state of perpetual financial distress. A key factor resulting in housing insecurity relates to unaffordable rental prices. This all trickles down to the mental health and physical safety, or lack thereof, of our youth. We recognize that there have been a lot of programs that have been put into place in order to try to increase the opportunities for stable housing. We recognize that the aim of the Family Rehousing Stabilization Program facilitates rental assistance and case management for 12 to 18 months. However, many housing advocates have reported that these programs have not succeeded in setting up participants to be able to maintain their stable housing. Barriers include the low wages, high rent prices, and limited 12 to 18-month window allowed for program participants. Once again, caregivers and their children deserve sustainable housing programs that truly empower them to sustain housing in a market where wage increase and affordable housing are made standard. One of our Black Swan Academy youth has been candid about her experience being unhoused and has stated that if you don't have a stable home, it's even harder to do well in school. Even if we are not the same as other families, we still deserve a safe place to live. Amplifying the voice of the youth, I'm here to ask the committee to extend and expand housing opportunity and the sustainability and feasibility of families to enter these programs, especially emergency programming, in order to give our youth opportunities for stability to be able to live and grow. Clean and safe housing is essential to the success of young people, and youth should not be at risk based on living in environments where there is hazardous material. The youth have asked me to amplify their demands under their campaign, again titled "Where Dreams Come Home." They are demanding that youth and families have increased access to affordable quality housing and ensure that units are available for larger families, an expansion of funding and access to utility assistance, new affordable housing developments to use quality material, timely and quality repairs for public housing and low-income housing, and the offering of financial education courses in K through 12 for our youth to grow into financial understanding and wellness. Thank you. We hope that you are able to see the work of our youth and that I have been able to amplify their message today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Trupti Patel, welcome.
Good morning, Chairperson White. Thank you for hosting this hearing so that my comments may be answered for the permanent record. The mission of the Office of the Tenant Advocate is to provide technical advice and other legal services to tenants regarding disputes with landlords, to educate and inform the tenant community about tenant rights and rental housing matters, to advocate for the rights and interests of district renters in the legislative, regulatory, and judicial context, and to provide financial assistance to displaced tenants for certain emergency housing and tenant relocation expenses. OTA provides a range of services to the tenant community to further each aspect of its mission. Advises tenants on resolving disputes with landlords, identifies legal issues and the rights and responsibilities of tenants and landlords, and provides legal and technical assistance for further actions such as filing tenant petitions. Provides in-house representation for tenants in certain cases and refers other cases pro bono or contracted legal service providers and attorneys. Works with other governmental and non-governmental officials and entities, including the council, the mayor's office, executive agencies, the courts, tenant stakeholders, advocates, and others to promote better tenant protection laws and policies in the district. There's a whole lot more I could say about OTA, but I would take up a bulk of my time, so I won't bore you with that. But what I did want you to know is that there is no other entity in the nation like OTA. It's dedicated solely to protecting tenants. I know because right now this agency is protecting me and my elderly mom as we deal with an unethical realtor who has attempted to bully, harass, and intimidate me and my elderly mother. I've literally had to state numerous times in writing to the realtor how they conducted business was egregious. The situation would break most people, and most people are broken as they don't know about OTA. But at least I did, and thus far, the legal team has been amazing in providing guidance and advice to me. They should have enough funding to be satisfied to take all calls and handle the cases on behalf of DC tenants. I urge the council to provide additional funding to the Office of Tenant Advocate so that services provided can be expanded and so that they can continue to advocate for DC residents. I wish this issue wasn't so personal to me now, but it really is, Chairman White. And, you know, as you said, this budget is horrible. It's doing cut after cut, and it's falling on the shoulders of the most vulnerable. And you know, entities like OTA are the only thing that protects residents. And, you know, I'm a tough cookie. I could take a lot. I know how to fight. But the fact that if OTA weren't around, I don't even think I could have taken on this unethical realtor. So if we can find any more money in the budget to expand their services, it would be great. So, and I'll yield back the balance of my time back to the dais. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I believe those are the only public witnesses with us today. Mykesha Simpson, I'm glad you're with us today. Even though these agencies aren't directly relevant, your issue is important, relevant, and urgent. You've been and your family have been in rapid rehousing for 3 to 4 years?
Since September of 2022.
Okay. And what has the agency been indicating in terms of the timeline of the program, or what your next steps have been over the past couple of years? What have they been communicating?
So I've had over 3 caseworkers, and in the process of that, I have informed each time, and I haven't had that done, which means they're asking questions or trying to figure out better solutions for me and my family. I've done that since I've been in the program, but I just feel like I haven't gotten the right assistance to progress, because it seems like I'm still doing the majority of the work by myself. When, for me being homeless, for me and my family for 4 years and having to struggle and ask people to live and, you know, just to have a roof over our head has been hard. I haven't even achieved my high school diploma yet. That's what I'm trying to do now. That's what I'm in school for now. But now it seems like I have to just, all of a sudden within the last 2 months, I have to up and figure out now where I'm going to live. What are we going to do next? Because the program has it's no budget. Not only that, I haven't had any assistance through DHS with providing help for payments. So my bill has been behind for 12 to 18 months now. I have received no assistance from the program, period. So now it's like everything's falling on me on what I haven't been able to pay and what DHS was supposed to get assistance from the budget from the program. So it says it hasn't been done over 12 to 18 months.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
I'm
When you
just
say
gonna
there
have
hasn't
a huge
been,
bill.
are you talking about rental assistance or different type of financial assistance?
So I'm through the rapid rehousing through DHS. So I went through Virginia Williams and I received help through Virginia Williams and they put me in a program. The program lasts for up to 12 months, depending on your status and where you're at in the program. So I just feel like I haven't gotten the right assistance, because every time that I've stayed with my caseworker, I'm trying to go to school, I'm trying to find a job. Obviously, it wasn't put in to the point now. I don't know where this has come from, but it's like within the last 2 months, it's like now you have to find somebody within the last 2 months, you have to be on your own and find a way to pay your own rent because there's no money in the program anymore. So I'm just trying to figure out, where do I go from now? Do we go back in the shelter? Like, what do I do? I'm just lost. I feel like me being in this program has not helped. It's just caused more issues. And I'm just trying to figure out where it's stored from, because as I read every day in the news with Mayor Bowser, she's had money being put into stadiums and stuff like that, but there's no fair housing for us. There's no future reference for us. It's like we're just stuck. You know, it's just, it's now we have to be put back on the street or go back to Virginia Williams, and that makes no sense.
What we are trying to figure out the same thing. So we were notified of the 2,000 evictions or terminations from rapid rehousing probably about the same time that you were notified, and we're looking for options as well, because just dropping 2,000 families out of rapid rehousing is going to result in so many issues. So we're trying to figure this out as well. What also has been clear is that the rapid rehousing program clearly is broken. It's putting a lot of people in the program that don't have a clear way out. And whatever assistance the program is providing is not getting people in a place where rapid rehousing, you're supposed to take over the payment of your rent. But almost nobody is able to do that at the end of the program because rent costs so much. So families end up going back into the shelter or sleeping on a couch somewhere. Either way, unstable and displaced. Do you know why when DHS put you and your family into the rapid rehousing program, did they tell you that they would assist you in obtaining an income that would allow you to pay your rent by the end of the program?
No. So they were supposed to pay their portion half, which I believe is probably like 40 to 50%, and I was supposed to pay my portion half. The job that I attained at the time was a temporary job. I kept letting all my caseworkers know what was going on, so my rent should have been adjusted. That hasn't been done for 12 to 18 months. Nothing that I asked has been done, and I asked about permanent housing, and it's just nothing.
So when you asked them to adjust your rent based on the change in your work, what did they say?
That it will be that they will notify their supervisor and it would be a change. But obviously it wasn't a change because I kept getting notices from the rental office. Not only that, my office has tried to reach in contact with DHS, and they told them that they've been trying to work on the case and see what's going on too.
And when did DHS say your not going to be part of the rapid rehousing program anymore?
The middle of last month.
Okay. And do you remember when your deadline is?
They said up to 30 to 60 days. They
Okay.
would let me know. But I also suffer through mental health, and that's something that I've been telling all my caseworkers.
We will be in touch with you. We're trying to figure this out as well. This was a pretty big announcement that was dropped on families. Again, we were notified. The council was notified around the same time that you were notified. So we are trying to figure this out. I don't want to see you and your family and other families end up on the street.
Yeah.
We're back at Virginia Williams.
Mm.
So we're going to figure this out. I know my team has been in contact with you, trying to get better and more frequent responses from DHS. And so let us continue to work with you to try to figure this out.
I appreciate you. I'm just trying not to be stressed out.
No, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you being with us.
Yes.
Irene Jacobs, thank you for your testimony. I think it fits very well with the testimony we just heard from Mykesha Simpson, considering not just what she's going through as a mother, but her children, what her children are going through. So I appreciate you lifting the concerns and voices of young people. Some of the issues I've heard from young people as well, but that you mentioned today. When we talk about affordable housing, we also need to make sure we're talking about larger units, family-sized units. Something that we have been working on both in public housing and private housing is the timeliness and quality of repairs. We've done some work in this committee that is speeding up the quality and timeliness of repairs in public housing. And the chairman of the council has taken the lead on a piece of legislation that will allow our agencies to go in and look at issues proactively so that we stop finding out about repairs once they reach a point of dire needs. I've also finally, after years of working, we are finally moving forward with financial literacy, which is related to one of the last parts of your testimony. So I want to thank you very much for your testimony today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Commissioner Patel, thank you for your testimony in support of OTA. We have worked hard over the years, even before I took the helm of the Housing Committee last year. We would send money to housing programs, including to OTA over the years, making sure they have sufficient staff, enough space for that staff. So I agree that their work is critical. And I've enjoyed working with them. We're going to continue to kind of push on metrics and goals so that we make sure the agency is continuing to grow, and we'll continue to have the support of the entire council. So thank you for your testimony lifting up the Office of the Tenant Advocate.
Chairperson White, can I give you a little bit of an addition to my situation? And I apologize. I didn't say it when I was testifying, but I think it's really, really important.
Yes.
So I do fall under TOPA in this situation. And so when the unit that I live in went up for sale, I filled out the paperwork, but apparently it wasn't done correctly, or I misunderstood something. I did try to reach out to OTA at that time, and I couldn't get in touch with anyone. I'm not here to bash OTA, please understand that. But I think it would have saved me a lot of stress that I'm now currently under, because the unethical realtor filed a complaint, not with DCHD. And I just literally got the paperwork last night, and it said that we don't count for TOPA because I didn't fill out the paperwork correctly. And I've lived in this unit for 20 and a half years. My mother is a DC resident, and she's been a resident for the last 8 years. And so right now I'm essentially being told that, it seems like I have almost no rights. I'll actually be calling OTA's attorney after this hearing. So just to let you know, like how important OTA is. Like if I probably didn't have OTA, I would have probably been losing my mind and crying. Like my poor mother is stressed out because she just flew in like 2 days ago. And like this housing situation is beyond stressing her out. So I did want to provide that additional context to you as well. So if my story and you know the ladies who are on this panel who have testified, if there's anything that I hope our stories can do is to help leverage get the funding needed to support the programs. Um, I know you can call me and I'm more than happy to talk to any council staff for to amplify the urgency if you need me to.
I appreciate that. I don't think you'll have trouble reaching OTA after this hearing, but if you have any issues and need our assistance, please let us know. Uh, thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you to all of our public witnesses for being with us today. You know, I recognize people take time out of their days to be a part of these important hearings, so I am grateful for that. We have 3 government agencies with us today, so we will move to our government witness, and I will first call up Interim Chair Adam Hunter from the Rental Housing Commission. And I'm going to ask that you and anyone else from the agency who may be testifying, I'm going to swear you in before you begin. You would raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide to the Committee on Housing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you so much. You can begin your testimony, and Judge Hunter, if it's not in your testimony, if you would also introduce, we know them, but for the public who is at the table with you.
Yes, joining me is Beth Spooner to my right, Daniel Meyer to my left, General Counsel for the Rental Housing Commission. May I begin?
Yes, please do.
Yes. Good morning, Chairperson White and members of the Committee on Housing. I am Adam Hunter, Acting Chairman and Chief Administrative Judge of the Rental Housing Commission. I am pleased to have the opportunity to testify regarding the Commission's budget for fiscal year 2025. I want to start by thanking Mayor Bowser for her continued support for the Commission and proposed FY25 budget. And thank you, Chairperson White, for holding this hearing and for you and this committee's continued support for the Commission. As you know, the Rental Housing Commission is a small, independent agency established by the Rental Housing Act of 1985. The 3 members of the commission are appointed as administrative judges by the mayor with the advice and consent of the council. In addition to the 3 members, the commission has 5 more full-time equivalent staff positions for a total of 8 FTEs at the agency. The mayor's proposed FY25 budget keeps the commission's budget essentially the same as FY24 at just over $1.36 million. 95% of the commission's budget is expended on personnel services. Other costs like information technology, equipment, training, and MOUs with other agencies are all in direct support of the commission and staff performing our duties. The FY25 RHC budget includes $13,000 for training and language access. The added funds for training directly aligns with our goals to increase training for commission personnel, both legal and administrative. We are appreciative of the mayor's support for the commission's mission and overall agency goals. In sum, this budget will allow the commission to continue performing all its functions. The commission looks forward to continuing the progress it has made in promptly resolving cases, keeping the regulations up to date, and improving public access to information about the Rental Housing Act and the commission's decisions. Thank you all for the opportunity to testify today, and this concludes my remarks, and I am happy to answer any questions that I can. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So as I've been doing with all the agencies under this committee, this budget season, I'm going to focus my questions on the goals you set for the Rental Housing Commission for this year. I've given this context at the other hearings, but as most people know in this city, this is a time where budgets are constrained. We still have the biggest budget in the history of the city, our 24th year with an increased budget, but our costs have risen more quickly than our budgets. And the fiscal prospect for the next few years, it looks like we're going to be in a similar situation. So this year, we're both raising taxes and cutting programs. We can't do that every year without seeing a really difficult spiral for our city, which means every agency in this government is going to have to be very clear about key priorities, what they're getting done, and what resources they're using to do it, which is why I want to really focus there. And this will help lead our work over the next year so that of everything happening, in the city, we kind of know what are the key things that move the agency forward, what success looks like, how we measure that success, and what the key things are that we can work together on. So we also know where to give additional support. So appreciate the goals that you and your team sent. I've asked all the agencies to utilize the SMART format for goals, meaning specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So we'll start with the first goal, which is by the end of fiscal year 25, decrease the average time to issue decisions on appeals to 290 days. I appreciate this one. This goal is specific, it's measurable, it's time bound. So thank you for this. I want to talk through the achievability of it. So for fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24 to date, the commission's average time to issue decisions is 334 days, according to the information I have. Is that correct or about correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And I think there are two outlier cases.
Correct.
Okay, we've talked about those before. You and I have talked about this at a recent committee hearing, and I'd like to go over it again. Can you please take us through what happens during the 334 day period and how many days each of those steps take?
And so what we're calculating is from at the conclusion of the hearing that happens with the 3 administrative judges and the litigants. Then during that time, it's reviewing of the record, working with the legal staff, drafting the legislation, drafting the decisions and opinions, and circulating them amongst the other judges to determine whether or not we can get consensus on the decision, and then we actually issue the decision itself. There are many different things that happen with the decision-making process and the discussions that happen amongst the legal staff, as well as developing consensus with the other judges that sometimes require additional time, and sometimes decisions can come out in shorter depending on the complexity of the issues. Sometimes when decisions get to the commission and realize that these are appellate issues, a lot of times there are complex procedural histories. Some of our cases go back a considerable amount of years, and some of them are also on remand from the DC Court of Appeals. So sometimes we're dealing with, matters that have come before us, have gone up to the Court of Appeals, have come back, have gone back down. There have been additional findings of fact by OAH. And so those things can change whether or not decisions can be put out sooner or later than others.
Okay. And clarify one thing for me. I think it was at the beginning of your response. What is day one?
So we're counting it from the actual hearing date.
Okay.
And so what we were looking at, and this was done by my predecessor, and looking at how do other appellate courts determine their success rates in regards of getting decisions and opinions out. And what was determined from, I can't remember the exact agency or organization, but it was determined that the average number to getting decisions out from the hearing date is 340 amongst other state appellate courts. And so we look at that as the benchmark at how do other appellate courts function across the country, very similar to our function at the commission.
Okay. So what in the process, roughly like how long does it take to draft a decision before it gets circulated to the other judges?
That all depends, and I don't have an exact number. That's not something we specifically track internally. Is the process that each judge that's assigned a case gets to the point of actually circulating an opinion. As you may know from appellate work, is that the judges meet and we talk and we evaluate matters and we discuss kind of where we should fall on a legal issue, and then drafting then occurs after that, then gets recirculated, and from there, judges will come to a consensus around how we reach our legal conclusions on a matter.
Is there a recommended timeline for a first draft of an opinion, or yeah?
Internally, no, we still hold true to the 340 number internally. But again, it's depending again on the specific case.
Yeah.
What was litigated, the complexity of an issue, the history of the case. Some of these cases come with very extensive factual findings out of OAH. If you look at findings that are coming out of OAH, some of them can be 50 pages long of factual findings, which is very different than other matters that may come out of OAH that have very specific, limited findings of fact. But in terms of what they have to do in terms of finding of facts, in our particular cases, they're pretty extensive. And so are the amount of litigation that happens at OAH.
Okay. So I appreciate the reference to other appellate courts. That's helpful for context. For people who don't work in this field, still seems like a long time to draft cases.
It does, and I would also add that we're also redrafting rulemaking that happens, and then usually judges have other cases that we are working on and drafting as well. So it's not just one case that's being handled at one particular time. There's still other matters that are happening that could also increase the amount of time when a decision gets put out.
But the caseload is pretty tame at this point.
It's tamed, but also we have to recognize that getting the legal conclusions correct is most important, and making sure that we review the record extensively, because if our case is appealed, it's appealed to the DC Court of Appeals, and they look at our cases the same way they look at all other cases. We have to cite specifically to the record in the correct form and fashion, and we're going to make sure that we get our findings correct.
What do you propose? So to go from 334 days to 290 days on average, what do you propose to change in your process? What will help you achieve that reduction in time?
I think one of the things that is helpful is that we just had a hearing on Judge Gregory, which will go before the full council, I'm assuming soon. She will be available and active. We've had Judge Carmichael that's now been on the commission now for over a year. Having 3 experienced judges working through issues makes things easier and better, makes our work better, particularly in discussing and understanding the issues and our purpose as appellate judges. I'm now in my 2nd year. I can tell you my first year, getting up to date with understanding what it means to be an appellate judge takes some time and truly understanding what the commission's obligations are and what our obligations as appellate judges, and then also being trained on being a good appellate writer. It's different than just being a regular litigator. The fact that we're now 3 experienced judges, I think makes a big difference in getting out cases in a timely manner.
Okay. Are there steps in that now 334-day timeline? Are there steps that are not in your control?
The things that are not in our control are really how the cases come to us. And we do have some cases that the date on them are kind of long and old and predates many of us on the commission, but those complexities are from how those cases were litigated prior to us, how those cases got to the DC Court of Appeals, and then some matters where you may have litigants that have multiple tenant petitions that have occurred subsequently to the ones that are before us that could either be put on hold because of other decisions that are happening. So sometimes the assumption is a tenant petition decision and we're done. That's an overly simplifying way of looking at how complex that sometimes these issues before they get to us. So we look at the totality of how those things are. Each case, each litigant is unique and different. You know, one of the things that we do have at the commission is we do have a mediation program as well. There's also mediation as well at OAH. And so we still try to give litigants an opportunity to look and decide whether or not mediation is also an option to resolve cases. And I also don't have what to say, make a statement.
I'll add to your question about, what's in control. The reason for measuring specifically that from the hearing to issuing a decision period is because that is the part that is most in the commission's control. I know you and other folks have asked, why isn't the metric from the day an appeal is filed until it's issued? It's because before the hearing, you're going to have parties maybe moving for continuances, drop the legalese. They're asking for a delay. They're asking for deadlines to be extended. So those things can push it out before it's entirely on the commission to do the review, do the drafting. So that's why we measure from the date of the hearing. So typically, it's most in control. Again, there's 3 commissioners and 2 staff attorneys who are working on any given cases at any given time. So still something that can happen is, you have other cases that are assigned to you as a judge, or the judge working with you as a staff attorney. You'll get procedural motions in those other cases, even while you're working on the merits of a larger decision. Those motions are typically kind of shorter term. So it's feels a little ADD sometimes of switching back and forth from being really in the weeds on one case to, you have to deal with something more promptly in a different case.
Okay. So let's say 90 days from now, Judge Hunter, how will we know, or the public know, whether you're on track to meet your goal of reducing the time for concluding the cases?
I think it's best to look at it almost from year to year to see kind of how the totality of all the cases are, rather than on a shorter 90-day time frame. That's a little bit, that's not the way in which we look at how decisions come out of the commission.
I understand that. The concern I have is that the strategy to reaching the goal just relies on experienced judges moving more quickly, which may be the case. I assume so, but I don't know. I haven't seen any data on it. But without sort of recommended timelines to get a draft opinion, and I realize why that would be complicated, but without proposed timelines for getting a draft opinion to the other judges, because that back and forth and circulation will take some time. I worry that there's not a system in place that will help move you to this goal. And so we won't know until a year from now how close you did or didn't get. That worries me a bit here. But I'm happy to kind of talk through that as we, meet and see what, if anything's, hinder or help that
Yes.
timeline progression. Do you measure cases in by calendar year or fiscal year, and or track cases rather?
We track them as they come in, but we look at it more in the fiscal year along with what comes before the council.
Okay. How many cases have come in so far this fiscal year?
I'm not sure at this point. I have to look, and I can get back to the council staff on.
Okay, if you could let me know, we'll be
Yes.
here for a little bit more. So if you could let me know before we wrap up, I'd appreciate it. So, by the time of submitting the commission's performance oversight responses in February, the commission had 10 cases pending resolution, 11 orders or opinions rendered, 2 appeals filed, and just 2 appeals hearings held in fiscal year 24. Does that sound about right?
That's about right. I know there's been some additional ones that have come in, and that sounds about right. Yes.
And for, not all cases have a hearing. Is that right?
They all have they all have hearings that come before us unless they're resolved during mediation.
Okay, okay. Do you try to get parties to mediation, or is it just something that happens
We
sometimes?
we pre-screen cases because not all cases are the best for mediation, but we do strongly encourage litigants if they can to mediate if possible.
And I think we've asked this before, but I can't remember. Do the judges do the mediation, or do you
No, we
contract it out?
have a mediator on staff,
Okay,
and she's
right.
been part of
that's
the
right.
Rhode House Commission for years.
Excellent.
There are 5 appeals that have been filed so far this fiscal year.
Thank you. Or how do you calculate the timeline for cases that don't have hearings that get resolved in mediation?
We calculated from the time that there are from when they're filed to when the mediation concludes and if there's a case is resolved. But otherwise, all the cases will go through the process of the date that we have before you, the time period, unless for some reason a case gets dismissed on some other motion that's been filed, and then those cases are resolved. I do believe we do track decisions, how soon decisions come out, I believe.
Okay.
But those are the only other reasons why a case will get resolved short of us issuing an opinion in a matter.
Okay, so the timeline, the 334 days, that's only for cases that end with a final order. Is that-
After a hearing.
After hearing, right?
Correct.
Okay, okay. So, last question on this goal. Is there anything else that needs to happen or would need to happen to help reduce, other than the tenure of the judges, in order to reduce the timeline for final decisions?
The only thing that is different, we talked about this before in other hearings, was that the statute statute mandates that each judge have a law clerk, and we haven't had law clerks for each judges, I think, probably since the establishment of the commission. But otherwise, with the current staff that we have, it's still the same recommendation as before.
Okay. Let me move to the commission's second goal. By the end of fiscal year 25, decrease the average time from the effective date of new legislation to its corresponding proposed rulemaking to 90 days. This goal is also specific, measurable, and time-bound. I appreciate this goal. This is one of the core functions of the commission. Since 2022, the commission has done two rulemakings, one for the Eviction Record Sealing Authority and Fairness in Renting Amendment Act, which took 205 days, and the other for the Fairness in Renting Clarification Amendment Act of 2023, which took 122 days. Are those the only two? Those are the only two I'm aware of. Am I missing any?
Yes.
Okay. When issuing rules, the commission is responding to legislation outside of its control. The commission's role is interpreting the law and making it more specific through regulations. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Okay. The 90-day goal would reduce the commission's most recent rulemaking timeline by about a month on average. What factors impact the amount of time it takes to issue a rulemaking related to new legislation?
So after we put out a public draft, there's public comment period that occurs. And then it comes back to us. There's legal sufficiency that happens through OAG as well. And then we make any corrections and then we place it out. Did you have any addition?
The complexity of the legislation, I think, is the main factor. Those aren't even always things that are entirely predictable. Something that might seem obvious if the council is writing a law and has one situation in mind. We may think it makes sense to us, and then we start writing the rule and realize there are possible outlier situations here that we need to figure out a rule around. I'll give one example on the record sealing and fairness and renting amendments. The language access component of it for certain notices to vacate. I spent a lot of time talking with the Office of Human Rights that enforces the Language Access Act, trying to figure out with them how the Language Access Act works for district agencies and how the commission could best apply that for these notices to vacate. That really ended up being a lot of conversations. And so that, pushed what seems conceptually a simple enough idea to a little further out. And even then we still, we have OTA here. Thank you for your comments. We still got comments on that. So that's just one example of where it can take a little longer. But I think pushing through and trying to hold ourselves to tighter schedules of when we're having these conversations with other agencies and doubling down on some of these efforts and tracking the legislation a little earlier in the process too, and starting that drafting from, maybe the first reading.
Okay, that kind of bleeds into my next question. The complexity of the legislation is something that's outside of your control. So yeah, I'm wondering what things you need to or plan to change in order to reduce the time it takes to do the rulemaking. So are there any other specific thoughts other than starting to track it prior to passage from the council?
I think tracking is a good way to get a head start on the work that has to be done, and then shifting the internal focus within the agency and knowing how important it is to know what that target is so that we can get it out within those targeted times.
The commission has two more goals. Both of these relate to testimony that you and Judge Lisa Gregory gave at a hearing in March for your appointments, training for commission staff, and user-friendly documents, including translation, which I appreciate. There's $13,000 in the proposed fiscal year 2025 budget to support training and language access programs. That's funding that could cover the commission's third and fourth goals. Is that right?
That is correct.
Excellent. If the commission does receive the $13,000, how much would go toward training and how much would go toward language access?
And that's something we're still working out, trying to identify, because I believe back in 2022, both myself and Judge Gregory went to a training. That training alone that we did in 2022 would take up most, if not all, of the 13,000.
Mhm.
So we had to kind of go back and rethink, how do we creatively figure out how to get as much training as possible for all the people within our agency, even discussing trying to bring in training in-house as a way of doing training as a whole, instead of individuals having to travel to training, because
Mhm.
it's the travel piece that makes
Yeah.
training hard or more expensive, or doing virtual training. So that's one way of doing it. And then with the translation, it depends on how we're trying to translate, but if given what we've recently seen in cost around translation, we could achieve both within the amount of money that's currently being provided.
Okay. What types of trainings are most useful for you all?
Well, for the legal staff, it's legal writing, opinion writing. The one that myself and Judge Gregory went to was legal writing for appellate judges.
Mhm.
So it was done by the Judicial College.
Okay.
So it was amongst other judges, taught by law professors that also teach judges. So it's very specific in how do you write and look through analysis as a judge, and then write it in a way and where both lawyers can read and understand, and judges can also understand what you're writing and who the reader is.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of um, different trainings around legal writing, but then also around administrative law as well. Because as you may know, it's a very technical area that not everybody has the experience with and understanding its complexity. And so those types of training, I think, is most helpful for legal staff and the judges.
Okay. Are those types of trainings available virtually for a private instructor or via uh, like YouTube or other seminar, whether subscription based or not?
Yes, the Judicial College does a lot of their things virtually. The one that Judge Gregory and I happened to go to was only being conducted in person.
Okay.
But I do believe it's something that we could find an instructor. I mean, we have plenty of well-qualified law professors in DC and other retired judges that I know we could probably look to conduct training in the office.
Excellent. I hope so. And to the extent that you haven't, please look for other like free or on-demand
Yes,
resources as
yes.
well. There are just so many of them now, which I'm just too excited about. For the legal staff, the goal is to attend at least one training on writing or administrative law. And the legal staff include the 3 judges and your general counsel. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there a need for the commission's administrative staff to learn administrative law, do any training in that space?
Not necessarily, but professional development is always necessary. So if part of the professional development is to go into areas of administrative law, then we will make that available as well, as long as the budget allows, but absolutely.
Excellent. Um, So the trainings you've mentioned support technical expertise, but there are other trainings that could be useful for judicial bodies, like trainings around bias and other sort of important things that wouldn't necessarily come up in the very judicial trainings or legal trainings. Is the commission considering other training options as well?
Um, we have it in terms of our SMART goal, but if they're available and it's relevant to the work that we're doing, we will absolutely include it into our training.
And the commission's final goal is by the end of FY '25, RHC will improve public communication by posting at least 3 plain language guidance documents on Rental Housing Act substance and/or procedures online and translating all procedural guidance documents into Spanish. For the plain language documents, the commission's goal is to create new documents that explain what's in the Rental Housing Act so that people without a legal background can understand it. Is that
That is,
right?
yes, yes.
Okay. And the commission would make sure the documents are at an average reading level, likely around 8th grade,
Probably, but maybe lower.
maybe lower. Yeah.
Yes.
I appreciate that goal. And as I asked it, I think, yeah, it should be lower than 8th grade. How will you achieve that goal? For example, will the commission have to partner with other organizations to ensure that they're user-friendly? Is that something you can do in-house?
It's mostly done in-house, but something we can also work with other agencies as well to look at and help us in creating a better, more user-friendly document. And as we have a fair amount of pro se litigants
Mhm.
that come to the commission out of OAH, and it's important to make sure that they truly understand exactly what our function is as an appellate body, and that this is not a second opportunity to retry your matter from OAH. So to understand that complexity
Yeah.
is so important for the average pro se litigant to understand.
Agreed. To the extent that you all have, and I don't know if the administration has a policy on it, but if you put the original document into a large language model like ChatGPT and ask it to regurgitate on a 4th grade level, it will do that and will probably do a pretty good job that you could review for accuracy. I think specific training opportunities could be easily found through programs like ChatGPT and Claude. I'd highly recommend you try it. It changes work tremendously.
Understood. I won't recommend it to my law students, but understood.
You might as well, because they're using it anyway. So, can the commission use funding designated as, matter of fact, they can do it for you too. They'll do it quickly. Can the commission use funding designated as language access to achieve part of this goal of plain language? But this also may not require funding.
I don't think it
Yeah.
does.
Okay.
It's probably a little bit part of it in that getting legal translation can be more expensive. So if we've done our job on getting plain English, that should be something that's easier to get
Easier,
into
that's right.
plain Spanish or
Yeah.
whatever other languages we need to.
Good point. For the procedural documents translated into Spanish, the commission currently only has one procedural document published. What is that one?
That's a guide to how to file a notice of appeal, and it's a little bit about what Judge Hunter was talking about of understanding what an appeal is and what kind of things you can argue. Having been the primary drafter on that, I'll plead guilty to. It's still not the most plain language thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I like your suggestion on ChatGPT. I'm going to try that.
Good.
We'll see what we can do and get that. But that's exactly the sort of thing that needs to be, it's the sort of procedural guidance that really needs to be in English and in Spanish.
Right. Well, I appreciate that, that focus of making the court and resources accessible is different than existing. It's making sure people understand in terms they understand and languages they speak, what you do and how to access those resources. So I appreciate that. So are you hoping to translate the plain language documents? Will those be the priorities for translating or?
Yes, it
yep.
would be, yes.
Okay. And are there any other languages that you are considering translating documents into?
Not at the moment, but I believe that's something that we can talk through internally at the commission and also talk to other agencies on what other priority languages are necessary for translation.
Okay. The government is required to do this in a way that I don't think anybody has figured out yet. There's a significant cost that we've never figured out. But language access is important, and we all need to be striving to get there. So I appreciate the steps that you're taking, and the work that you and your teams are doing. Continue to utilize us for support as we can be helpful or supportive. We're going to do everything we can to protect the budget in the proposed budget. And if there are other manageable things you need us looking at, please do let us know. Not that I have high hopes that we'll be able to get a lot extra done this year, given the fact that almost every program in this committee has been cut, but we want to see our agencies succeed. So appreciate the work that you all are doing. Chief Judge Hunter, thank you for being with us today. Beth Spooner, good to see you again. And Dan Mayer, always good to see you, and to your teams who are at the office working. I appreciate what they're doing, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
That concludes my questions for the Rental Housing Commission. We are going to move to our second government witness, Chief Tenant Advocate Johanna Shreve of the Office of the Tenant Advocate. But then I felt like a jerk. Thank you very much for being with us, Chief Tenant Advocate Shreve. As you know, it's the practice of this committee to put our government agencies, witnesses under oath. Thank you very much. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide to the Committee on Housing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you so much. You can begin your testimony.
Shall I begin?
Please do.
Okay.
Yes.
Good morning, Chairperson White, members of the committee and staff. I am Johanna Shreve, Chief Tenant Advocate of the Office of the Tenant Advocate. I am here today to discuss the mayor's proposed fiscal year 25 budget for the OTA and the impact it will have on agency operations. I want to begin by acknowledging the district's current fiscal crunch and the difficult task that budget formulation poses for both the mayor and the council this year. The mayor proposes a budget of $3,918,196 for the OTA, which represents a decrease of 6.1% compared to the agency's approved fiscal year 24 budget of $4,158,000. The budget is comprised of two sources of funding: local funds in the amount of $3,248,471, which represents approximately 83% of the agency's budget, and special purpose revenue funds in the amount of $669,725, which represents approximately the remaining 17% of the budget. The agency's budget is allocated among 5 major programmatic areas: education and outreach, policy advocacy, legal representation, administrative services, and emergency housing assistance. On the personnel side of the equation, the proposed budget reduces the FTE count by 0.3%, which reflects the allocation of a shared agency fiscal officer delegated to the agency by the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. Additionally, the single FTE and information technology support was shifted to the education and outreach branch to address the loss of APRA funding for one of our outreach specialists. This accounts for all of the PS adjustments to the FY25 budget compared with FY24. Therefore, the budget concerns raised in this testimony and in the agency's responses to the committee's pre-hearing Q&A mostly relate to non-personnel services. For that end, the chart below compares the FY24 approved and FY25 proposed NPS agency budgets broken down by branch. My biggest concern regarding the agency's FY25 proposed budget pertains to the following reductions and the impact those reductions will have on core agency services and operations. The FY25 budget proposal eliminates the agency's ability to implement 2 MOUs that have been in place for the past several years with the Departments of Human Services and the OCFO. Elimination of these services will critically hamper our ability to be an effective agency in the areas of recruiting and meeting government-wide training mandates, as well as budget preparation, monthly reconciliation, and other vital operational activities. The budget proposal eliminates all $32,000 associated with the agency's MOU and DCHR for human resource services. Without restoration of this funding, the OTA will not be able to compensate DCHR for agreed upon services in FY25 nor in FY24. As a status update, the FY25 letter of intent with DCHR for that agency's services in the amount of $22,627 has been developed and awaits execution. In the instance of our MOU with OCFO, the mayor's proposal provides funding for these services. However, it removed the 0.3 FTE associated with the agency's fiscal officer. We are therefore requesting that this partial FTE be restored, if not otherwise appropriately accounted for in the district budget, to ensure there is no interruption in our OCFO services. Elimination of funding for OTA statutory activities and operations. The OTA annual report. The FY25 proposed budget eliminates all $25,000 for this purpose. Our annual report is required by statute. The agency hopes to continue contracting for the report, including the printing of hard copies. I believe this is important in order to ensure that our readership includes elderly residents and others who may lack online access to information. Each year, the agency distributes copies of the report to a variety of public venues across the district, including 26 libraries and at many of our educational and outreach events. Moving expenses assistance for emergency housing assistance clients. The FY proposed budget eliminates all 20,000 for the purposes of moving assistance and storage of belongings for emergency housing clients who have been displaced from their homes due to a government closure or fire. The elimination of this program benefit will exacerbate the burdens that tenants face in this moment of crisis. Requests for storage of personal goods have decreased in recent years. This coincides with high storage facility costs in the DC area that more recently have made OTA-funded storage assistance prohibitive. Nevertheless, requests for moving assistance have not declined. The restoration of $10,000 would maintain our current ability to provide moving assistance to emergency housing clients. The annual tenant summit. The FY25 proposed budget eliminates all $100,329 for the tenant summit. While the traditional in-person tenant summit has not been held since the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the agency has held both larger and smaller scale tenant education and outreach forums on a virtual basis, and we plan to continue to increase the number of these educational forums in FY25. The restoration of $75,000 will provide sufficient funding for materials and publicity for purposes of this activity. This activity and these events are foundational for the agency and promote one of its key statutory mandates to provide tenants association, and indeed the entire rental community with vital information that empowers people to understand and vindicate their rights and otherwise make good decisions. Printer maintenance. The FY proposed budget eliminates all $18,000 allocated for maintaining the office's 3 printers. The OTA's physical office is staffed 5 days a week, and use of the office printers is continuously used. While as director, I encourage the use of electronic materials to cut down on the use of paper, printing remains necessary, particularly for our educational and outreach team. The agency needs $10,000 to cover the maintenance and supply costs associated with printers. New funding needs. 3 ongoing OTA priorities would require additional funding in FY25 beyond what has been appropriated in prior fiscal years. 2 of the enhancements would enable the agency to move meaningfully, pursue important statutory functions, kickstart the OTA's billing and liening authority to secure reimbursements from landlords for emergency housing services where appropriate, and litigating in the public interest. The 3rd would modernize our office's communications equipment, thus significantly enhancing its utilization for both agency staff and the public. The agency continues to develop a program to systematically identify landlords who are at fault for tenant displacement due to unabated violations of the Housing Code and the Property Maintenance Code, and hold them liable for agency expenditures under the Emergency Housing Assistance Program. Pursuant to its statutory billing and liening authority, the agency began laying the groundwork for this program some years ago. That groundwork includes working with OAG to develop the framework for guidance and regulations as necessary to ensure a consistent and fair application of billing procedures that will withstand any legal challenge, and more recently, working with DOB to develop a draft memorandum of agreement so that OTA can receive proprietary data to inform the agency's liability determinations. This program will lead to the recoupment of taxpayer dollars, which will be deposited into a revolving fund to be deployed for future emergency housing cases. Moreover, at a time when the already intense workload on our single program administrator continues to rise, it will also add to the workload for current staff associated with the program in a number of ways, including data management, data review and assessments in order to properly make liability determinations, issuance of bills and accounting for reimbursements received, and enforcement as it will be necessary for the agency to assist the OAG in its own defense when a housing provider challenges an OTA liability determination. To carry out the associated tasks, the agency would need 2 additional administrative FTEs and associated funding. One of the OTA's key statutory mandates is to represent tenants in the judicial or administrative proceedings. While the OTA does sometimes represent tenants in court on a limited basis, the OTA has sufficient resources to fully represent only a few tenants each year for the entirety of their cases. A key agency goal is to develop an attorney staff that is robust enough to handle public interest litigation while continuing to meet the heavy community demand for brief services. I note the agency's winning track record when representing tenants in court, including final decisions and advantageous settlements. My goal is to add 2 attorney FTEs to the legal branch to advance the agency's public interest litigation mission. The agency is slated to move to a new office at 899 North Capitol Street, Northeast this fall. However, the FY25 proposed budget does not provide the agency with funding for audio, visual, and network equipment in the new space or for maintaining a modern call answering system. The total amount needed for these items is $150,000 in one-time funding and $13,000 in recurring funding, which breaks down as follows. First, we have discussed with OCTO an upgrade to our telephone system to enhance the agency's customer service capacities. We provided them with a description of needed features, including the ability to help direct the diverse calls we receive on a daily basis. We anticipate operationalizing the new telephone system in the current fiscal year, an expenditure our FY24 budget will support. We would be able to maintain that system once we move to our new space. To do so, the agency needs a recurring appropriation of $3,000 per year to cover the $250 monthly service fee payable to OCTO in FY25 and beyond. Second, with respect to the AV equipment, the agency has provided the committee with the contractor's scope of work and cost estimates, which would provide sufficient wireless connectivity for a modern office in which most work is done electronically, and teleconferencing and visual media capabilities that align with those maintained by other district agencies. Accounting for potential cost overruns and foreseeable miscellaneous costs identified by the contractor, the agency estimates that $150,000 in one-time funding would be sufficient to complete this AV work. The $13,000 in recurring costs associated with the office move includes $10,000 annually for preventative maintenance for AV equipment. And I want to add at this point, because I'm very upset about this, I'm really upset about the fact that DGS is forcing me to move, but it's not paying for this service, for this installation. Because we didn't have the money in the beginning when they told us we had to move, but they're forcing me to find the money in order for my televisions and whatnot to be put up in the office. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I am also concerned that the proposed revised budget for FY24, and I will simply note that the elimination of the agency's NPS and the SPR funding for FY24 corresponds to the elimination of the same in the proposed FY budget that I've already described. We have a concern that we would also like to bring to the attention of the committee, and it relates to the BSA. As the Chief Tenant Advocate, I'm raising the following BSA concern on behalf of district tenants for the committee's awareness. Under Title VI, Subtitle O of the fiscal year 2025 BSA, housing providers could penalize tenants for unusual or extreme energy use, thus making tenants liable for the housing provider's failure to meet building energy performance standards requirements. Based on the definition of unusual or extreme energy use set forth at lines 1779 through 1786 in the BSA, and in footnote 13 of my written testimony, it is apparent that this provision is intended to apply to commercial tenants only, not residential tenants. Our concern is that no other language in the relevant provision either implicitly or explicitly limits the non-compliance payment to commercial tenants. I ask that the committee work with the Committee on Transportation and the Environment to clarify and explicitly state that this provision does not apply to residential tenancies. In my conclusion, thank you again, Chairman White, and members of this committee for your continued support of our work. I am welcome to be here, and I'm ready to answer any questions that you may have of me at this time. And just to note that we did forward to you a revision of our SMART goals so that you would, in the format that you requested. So I do believe you have those at your disposal at this time.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate you revising those. I only got them during the last agency's testimony, so I have not been able to review them closely, so we can run through them. So the first goal is implement the agency's billing and lien authority in order to recoup EHAP expenditures from landlords. So EHAP pays for housing after tenants have been displaced. Is that right?
That is correct.
And today, do you collect money from landlords, so reimbursements for EHAP?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay.
We do have one housing provider who will be paying us money.
Okay.
I tried to get a status update on that particular one, and that has nothing to do with the building closure. It has to do with the fire. And you might remember this fire happened based on the installation of solar equipment that was installed in a property in Southeast. So the property caught on fire. And because of insurance, that particular housing provider indicated that he would be reimbursing us for his tenant stays.
Okay, that's good. Does the statute give you authority to do this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you are in the process of reviewing a memorandum of agreement from DOB to collect data about landlords whose tenant displacement leads to EHAP expenditures?
That is correct. We didn't need money to do that. Two things have occurred. One, my very confident and very intelligent director of policy had been working on this matter for me 6 years ago.
Mhm.
And it happened around the time when the pandemic came into place, and two things happened. We started conversations with OAG about it. And the individual that was working with Joel on this matter actually passed away.
Mm.
So we had all of what was good was that we had all of the notes and all of the recommendations that OAG had given us. So we have pulled those out of the dust, and we are now working on the revisions to all of the regulatory issues that OAG brought to our attention. And at the same time, because of our relationship with the Department of Buildings, I had one meeting, I think you'll remember, because I spoke about this during during our oversight hearing. And we received the MOA. Our general counsel has reviewed it. Joel has also reviewed it. We have some concerns with respects to some of the provisions in the MOA, so I'm working on those now. That didn't take any money to do. It just, so we're trying to get the structure, the infrastructure in place so that I can start receiving the information and looking at it for two reasons. One, I'm interested in trying to understand why during the fiscal years 22, 23, we had 239 buildings closed. I want to know why those buildings closed. And the other thing I'd like to know for the benefit of the city council as well is how many of those buildings that did close over those 2 fiscal years have been reopened? How many of the tenants who had the right to return were notified and they returned?
Let me do this. I'm interested in building closures, but if I want to stay focused on this one so that, and we'll get to building closures, because I want to know the same thing, but I want to make sure I don't get lost in 2 different subjects. So on EHAP, who provides the EHAP funds? Is it OTA or a different agency?
The EAP funds are provided to the Office of the Tenant Advocate through local funding.
Okay, so they come through, so
So
they
the
come
Office
through
of the-
OTA.
The Office of the Tenant Advocate administers the program.
Okay.
And the young lady to my right, Rebecca Berry, she manages the money. So she She, along with Tamala, my chief of staff, are in constant conversation with respects to the paying for the bills, because we do
Okay.
pay our bills on time.
So in this goal, implement the agency's billing and lien authority. I want to focus first on specificity. Meeting this goal would mean what? That you have written the appropriate regulations and have a process, or that you have started to recoup funding?
It means that we will have written the regulations by the end of '24 in order to assure that when we launch the program in '25, we are ready to do business. Meaning that all of the considerations that the Office of the Attorney General had laid before us with regards to challenges that could occur on behalf of the housing providers, that we have covered those bases in terms of our regulatory procedures.
Okay, so by the beginning of fiscal year 25, you want to have the infrastructure in place in order to start collecting
That is correct.
money. Okay. Well, will part of that infrastructure include enforcement? So I think asking for the money is the easy part. Getting the money seems to me like it's going to be the harder part.
Well, that's why we need the staff. It's almost impossible for Tamala and I to run this program in addition to everything else we do. I mean, we need to ensure that we have at least 2 staff people that will be focused on managing this program for me.
And will those be people with collections experience? Will they be lawyers? What type of staff would that be?
What I project is to have 1 paralegal and 1 top-level administrative person so that we can work, because one of the other caveats, one of the other parts of the program also deals with the Office of Tax and Revenue, where if they do not pay after a certain period of time, we will lien the property. So we have, it's a 3-tiered piece. If they object to the determination, it may very well go to a legal challenge. That would go to OAG. If they refuse to pay, but they haven't objected, then a lien is placed on the property, and that would go to the Office of Tax and Revenue. So we
Okay.
have to set up a relationship and an MOA with them also.
And if it becomes an insurance matter, which I assume it will frequently, you all would sort of be in the back and forth with the insurance company?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And answering that question, I think for the most part deals with identifying and ensuring that all of the individuals that we are charging them for are eligible tenants to that particular property.
Okay.
Which is a question that was raised to us by the Office of the Attorney General.
Okay. And I'll wrap up after this question. So measurability, how do we measure progress toward this goal?
The first measure will be the signing of the MOA with the Office of the Building Department, which I didn't put a date certain in there, but my projection is June 1st. And my MOA with the Office of Tax and Revenue would be August 1st. Just because I don't have a strong relationship with that staff as I do with Brian Hanlon, Director of Department of Buildings.
Okay. We have been joined by my colleague, Councilmember Matt Fruman from Ward 3. Councilmember Fruman, do you have questions, statement, both?
I'll forego a statement, but I have a few questions that I'd like to ask.
Excellent, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman White. Good to see you.
Good
Thank you.
afternoon, council member.
We're not quite to the afternoon, are we? Because
Oh,
I'm
good
in
morning.
trouble.
Yes, we still are in the morning. aren't we?
Okay, that's
Yes.
good. That's good. You scared me. And thank you for all of the work that you and your office do. We reach out to your office frequently and have had a great partnership on difficult issues. One of the things that you ask for in your testimony is 2 more attorneys. And I'm
Yes.
curious, what kinds of cases, what need will those attorneys fill? What kinds of cases are you thinking that you would want to be able to take on that you aren't able to take on now? Will they help you in customer service? What role will those attorneys play? Why are they important in your additions to your office?
Let me give you an example of when you talk about the types of cases. We had to refer a case to a Attorney General Racine when he was here. It related to the Darrow properties. And the case came to the Office of the Tenant Advocate. The whistleblower came to the Office of the Tenant Advocate, but I didn't have the litigator to take the case. I had to turn it over to the OAG. And I think that had I had the litigators, we would have taken the case ourselves and got the $10 million settlement, as opposed to that settlement going to the OAG. And there have been instances when it is of public interest, and we have a lot of that going on right now, where we can defend the tenants, the class action situation. I can't do that now because the attorneys that I have are too busy dealing with brief services. We are doing 200 plus cases a week. The phone is ringing off the chain every day, and they just don't have the time to do. If I take somebody and say, okay, you're going to be a litigator, now I've taken away from our capacity to service all of the calls that we get in. And the time has come, because this is a responsibility I have by mandate to represent. And I have not been able to do that. In the past, when I first started, I was able to get funding for our legal service provider program. And we doled out the money to various nonprofit legal entities, and they assisted us in taking care of the minutia of cases, different kinds of cases, whether it's a public housing, whether it's an elderly. All of these cases are different. Some of them have broad connotations for everybody in the city, and some of them don't. But at that point, if you go back and look at our track record, we gave back $23 million to the tenant community.
So on that, I'm hearing a couple of different things. I mean, one thing is all of the burdens on your office and dealing with hundreds of calls all the time. And so more bodies doing things, leaving space for others to be responding to those other issues. That's one thing. But what's the significance of, what's the difference between the OAG doing the case and you doing the case? If the OAG does it, does the money go into the general fund? If you do the case, does the money go someplace else?
I don't know where the money goes on the OAG side.
But where does it go?
And we didn't get any, as the referring agency, we got no financial benefit from that particular, other than being at the press conference, okay?
But if your litigator did the case, what would happen to the money? Would the money go into a fund that you had access to, or where would?
Well, we have a fund that it could go into.
I see. So that,
and damages directly to the tenants.
I see. And when it's the OAG, it doesn't necessarily
It
go
doesn't
to,
work that way.
it doesn't go to the tenant.
No,
So
the
this is a
tenants get
way,
nothing.
I see. But also some could go to you.
Could go
So
to
you-
the operation of the OTA, yes.
Yeah. And then you said about the legal services provider network, which is a thing we've talked about before. Is it that you need 2 new attorneys, or if you had funding to re-stand up that legal services provider community, would that achieve your goals?
Well, let me answer it this way. It's sort of like it's a competitive ring now, because if you go into the committee that deals with justice for the council, you're already giving those same attorneys now, you give them, I think like $300,000 plus for right to counsel. When we had in the beginning, when I had no attorneys at all, and when Councilmember Graham set this up, one of the parts of it, and I don't know if it was a discussion, to be honest with you, with the legal service community about them receiving funds, but they gave me $350,000 to fund a legal service provider entity. And that helped me because the tentacles then allowed me to have all of these various legal issues, as I was saying, public housing over here, elderly over there. Those types of things were being handled by these other concerns who specialize in those particular areas. And so from a cumulative standpoint, it was a win-win.
Okay, so, I mean, and I hear you on all of that. I mean, one of the things that makes me particularly sympathetic to this is your reference to hundreds of calls coming in. Your office is fabulous in working with us in addressing issues, but I do have the sense that you're overwhelmed with requests, and it's very hard to stay on top of and in front of all of those requests that come in. And a thinly staffed agency is gonna confront those kinds of challenges, but what kinds of things, I mean, are you satisfied with your ability to respond to all of the calls that come in? And if
That's
you,
why I'm asking for money to, that's why we've had the conversation with Octo. That's why we are in the process of upgrading our telephone capacity. That's why I want to use new technology, so I don't have what I saw or heard, what I heard today. When someone says they call my office and they didn't get a response. Was not something that I've ever had to address before. But in the last year, and I'm being very, very forthright about this, I've had calls from council offices saying, you know, this tenant called and said that they couldn't get through to the OTA. When we do the research, we find out that's not necessarily the case. But irrespective of that, technology has changed. And now if a person calls you, the phone system is such that it can call you right back and say, "We're sorry we missed your call, but we want to let you know we're going to call you again." That then changes the dynamics and my capacity of dealing with customer service. Because in my agency, it's extremely important that we talk to every tenant that calls us.
Right.
And in the past, I've never had that problem. Once I got a few calls saying that people had called me and they weren't served, that's when I knew I had to do something about the telephone system.
so my time is up. I mean, I'm glad to hear that you see it as an issue. As great as the cooperation is, we do hear every once in a while,
Sure.
you know, we're having a challenge getting through. And so acknowledging, the first step is to acknowledge there's a challenge here, and the next step is to figure out what kinds of things we can do to try to address
fix
it.
Sure.
But I'm glad to hear that you candidly acknowledge you want to get this
The
to be
buck
doing
stops
better.
with me.
Thank you.
I mean, the buck does stop with me, and if your office calls me, if Councilmember White's office calls me and said that somebody tried to get through and they didn't, I'm the person that has to figure out what happened. And so that's why I said the next step was to upgrade our telephone system. And so Octo came in, they met with us. What we are proposing is that come June, we would set up this new system now, so
But-
that I have an opportunity to play the system through before we move to the new site. And if there are any bugs in it, I can fix them before I get there.
Wonderful. The buck stops with me too, and I'm 2 minutes over, so the buck's about to hit me and
Okay.
clobber me.
Thank you, Councilmember Proven. Get back to the first goal of implementing the agency's billing and lien authority in order to recoup EHAP expenditures from landlords. So in terms of achievability, this is only achievable if you get 2 additional FTEs.
Well, let's put it this way. There are certain things I can do without any staff inclusion. The reality of making the program professionally a part of the overall emergency housing system requires us to add new staff to it. You know, and maybe that's incremental.
Mhm.
Maybe I get one person this year and then one I add in 26, but I've got to have more staff. We multitask, council member, to the point of nauseam right now. All of us we wear 10 and 15 hats apiece in the office. I mean, it's a lot of stuff that we do.
Right.
And I can't pretend that the administrative strokes that will go along with this new extension of services can be done without additional staff. It just can't.
Okay, it sounds like the achievability of this goal, you can achieve this goal really only if you get additional staff. Is that right?
I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna tell you, say that. I mean, that's like saying, if I don't have this, I'm saying that the programmatic functions of that, this new, I either have the people to help support it
Mhm.
or I don't.
And this is for recouping, not for getting money out the door, right? Because you get money out the door now, right?
The council, I mean, the council and the administration approves 500,000, 560,000 a year. We get the money out the door.
Okay. Um, and so the two new people would really be focused on recouping.
That's what, that would be your job.
Okay. Where would that money go? Would it go to the general fund or would
No,
it go?
sir. It would go to our revolving fund so
Okay.
that we would have funds to continue the program. If you look at, the 9 questions that you submitted to me, asking for, how much money we had spent on the program since February and March, I tell you that, but I also tell you that to date, we've spent $399,000 of the 560, which leaves us 160,000 and change. We are almost at the point of having to call the administration and say, we're almost out of money.
Right.
Because usually by May of every year, we've gone through $500,000.
And do most people who utilize the funds go back to where they were living after the issues have been
I can't
resolved?
tell you that.
Okay.
That's part of what I'm trying to find out now. I'm trying to find out what happens to those individuals who were closed out of their units.
Okay. You were talking about not building closures you're talking about displacement, closures for, that led to immediate displacement.
For them to be temporarily housed in a hotel.
I'm with you. Okay.
What I don't know is after 14 days, or if I extend their stay based, sometimes we are in constant communication with the landlord. When those happen, we know whether or not the tenant is going to be able to return to their home.
What is the, do tenants still have to pay rent while they are displaced?
That's a conversation that may go into a court
Okay.
situation. The answer in my mind would be no, but
Contract question.
it is,
Yeah.
it really is a contract
Right.
question.
Okay. I'm trying to understand without enforcement what the sense of urgency is for the landlord to get things corrected as quickly as possible. I think if they have to pay back the displacement funds, the EHAP, that's going to move them as quickly as possible.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I think first and foremost, them receiving a letter from our office informing that this is not a holiday for you as a slumlord.
Right.
My concern is that the perception that we've given them is that it's like an alcoholic. We've enabled you to be a slumlord because we're paying for your tenants to be in this hotel.
Okay.
Now we had a situation, and we just had this, where a housing provider was freaked out by the fact that we told him he was going to have to pay. He said, I don't have any money. Okay. And we know that based upon cases in court, if you go into the housing conditions calendar court, there have been cases in which the judge has postponed and orders a housing provider to repair because they can show financial incapacity. So here we are with situations where we know that particular housing provider. So I said, well, inform him that we will lien his property.
Yeah.
Because we're going to get the money back. I'm determined that we're going to stop this nonsense of it's okay for you not to take care of the tenant, to not maintain the property, and then the government puts the tenant in a hotel, and it's okay for you not to have to pay us our money back?
Right.
I don't think so.
Okay. So, okay, and so then the conversation on closure makes more sense to me now. So you're working with DOB to start getting that information?
Yes.
Excellent.
Like I said, the MOA
Mhm.
that they submitted to me, my general counsel and Joel have looked at it and I have reviewed it. We have some concerns about certain provisions within the MOA, so we'll be still talking to them.
Mhm.
But I do intend to have that signed by June 1st.
Great. And if you need assistance from us on that or with Office of Tax and Revenue, please let us know so we can
Thank you very much.
do whatever we need to do to keep them moving.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Councilmember Fruman.
Thank you very much, Chairman White. Um, So one of the things that we see a lot and you hear about it is where there may be a tenant in a building who's creating issues for other tenants. And this is a challenge for you. I just had actually happened to be a condominium building, but where there was a person who's been threatening other tenants and it's not necessarily that many cases, but where we have cases like that, they really do create a lot of issues. How do you deal with those issues where it's one tenant complaining about the behavior of another tenant?
We can't. It's a legal matter of tenant versus tenant. We're not going to get, from a legal standpoint, we're not going to get engaged in that dialogue. We may talk to housing providers with regards to the cure, the cure issue of that particular tenant's behavior. But what we hear is even when they've given them the notice to cure, it does not change in some instances the problematic issue that they are facing. And I'm not certain, because I haven't done this research, and maybe we should look into it, as to whether or not the court's agreement to escalate cases where bad behavior is the issue, that they escalate those cases for hearings so that they're not delayed 90, 120 days. I'm not sure that that's effectively working.
So, and I understand that your brief is different, but I'm sure, I feel confident that a number of the calls that come into your office relate to these kinds of issues, and you must be aware of this dynamic that's out there. Do you have, if it's not you, but it is in your world, do you have suggestions? This is a thing I'm grappling with. Do you have suggestions about where to go to try to come up with solutions on this issue? Even if it's not you, it's in your world. What kinds of things would you suggest that we should be looking at to try to address this? Because I do think it is a thing that's having a significant impact on a significant number of tenants. So I'm curious your
If it's
your
a voucher
suggestions.
holder, I believe that the most effective part of that is to write to the administrator of the vouchers with the housing authority. They have a federal responsibility. If the individuals are not adhering to the federal requirements, they can terminate the voucher. And once the voucher is terminated, the housing provider is compelled to charge market rent, which means that an eviction will occur. Because there are behavioral standards that are conditional to the voucher. And if they are not being adhered to, then the housing authority and their board should be making it abundantly clear to all individuals who receive vouchers that these federal rules and regulations have to be adhered to. And I don't think that they do. Now, on the other side of the conversation, where the challenge gets more, where it gets more challenging, I think, is on the behavioral mental health side. Because they also receive vouchers, and they're subrecipients of those vouchers which are administered by the housing authority. Everyone must understand that the vouchers that they receive, when they receive them, that means that they are subrecipients. There should be a subrecipient agreement between the agencies that inform that agency what the rules of engagement are. But when it comes to the behavioral health side, you have a bigger problem in terms of who's in charge. I haven't been able to figure that one out yet. And that seems to be one of the major issues when I hear and when we receive certain kinds of complaints. It's clear that it is a behavioral health issue and not just a straight out tenant
So-
issue.
So that's helpful. So looking at that agreement between the Behavioral Health Agency and DCHA and what's the guidance provided there, that could be a place to look at in terms of ensuring additional supports if you're in a situation where additional supports can make a key difference. All right, let us look into that space. I want to ask you about a related thing, and I just I have to believe you get emails from the same people I get emails from, and that you'd be hearing about it more broadly, and that is smoking in non-smoking buildings, where a lease says the building is non-smoking, but it is not treated as
That's
that.
happened. We see that a lot now.
And what do you do?
There's nothing that I can do about it. I'm trying to understand the housing provider and their management company when they are ignoring their own rules, their house rules that say you can't smoke in the property. One of the bigger challenges is the consequence of a bill that you council members passed, and that's on marijuana. While it's okay to smoke it, it violates, for some people, their rights. And so even in a building where you can smoke, where you have marijuana smoke going on, you've got we see major complaints because of that. And it's a consequence of the law. I mean, the law it's not illegal to do it, but it is imposing on the will of those that don't engage.
Yeah, so, but in a non-smoking building where the smoking is allowed, do you have a suggestion to me, another, like you did in the other setting, of what do I do to try to protect the rights of the people who signed a lease that says it's a non-smoking building, may have health issues, and then it turns out not to be a non-smoking building? What should I do?
Well, I think that the council could probably advance a bill that would address the accountability of the management companies and owners. If you look at right now, we don't have any laws on the books that allow you to do like you do with the 2530 on the HUD side, which means I can suspend you from doing business in my town because you're causing more problems than you are good. And I think that needs to be put in place so that people can take you seriously when you say, we demand that you respect the rights of the people that live in the property. And if you, housing provider, can't control the people that what are your tenant selection policies? Number one, are they being administered to? Number two, to the housing providers that I talk to sometime, their frustration is getting before the courts and being able to get the people out of the building who are causing those problems. But I think that the other part is that you have housing providers that don't take us seriously enough, and they are still in business. I could name one company that's in business right now that the complaints just keep on coming, and we don't have any laws on the books that allow us to get that person, to suspend them from doing business in our town.
All right, with that, thank you.
I could just give you the name and you'd know who I was talking about. And you already know who I'm talking about.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you off the record, but for now, I'm gonna go talk to you later. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilmember Fruman. So let's move to the second goal, hold at least 5 lease clinics at college campuses across the district, at which students and other attendees will receive advice from OTA staff as to the provisions of their current rental leases and/or leases they are considering signing. In addition to holding at least 5 clinics, our goal is to assist a total of at least 25 attendees with their lease questions or concerns across all clinics. The OTA does clinics now, is that right?
Yeah.
About how many annually?
We've curtailed those. They've been curtailed. So maybe they get one per campus. But the noise is very loud. And I'd like to step it up. When we started this process many years ago, we were very active on college campuses because we're also part of the consortium of higher education. And I believe that it's really important for us to protect the young first contractor, the person that's getting their first contract. They need to know what the rules of engagement are, and most of the time they don't. But reviewing that lease with them, I believe will strengthen their and empower them to be much more savvy about their rights. And the other part, dealing with joint and several liability issues, which is a biggie when you're dealing with college campus students.
So that's you would need to be able to engage them like early in a new semester or school year in order to help them review their lease before they sign it, right?
Each college campus is a little bit different. I'll use Georgetown as an example. They start, for the students that live off campus, they start in sophomore year. Those students are signing leases for their third year, which would be off campus, in their sophomore year. What we plan to do is to hold a meeting with all the residents' life staff that deal with the off-campus living. And since we have a relationship with them, and to bring them together, and then to set up the times based on each college's seasonal.
I see.
Yeah, letting them tell us what's the best time for us to engage on their particular campus.
Yeah, and you said a few minutes ago there's a lot of noise. What did you mean by that?
What I mean by that is the students calling us.
Okay.
That's what brought me to the point of saying we need to get back into it.
Okay.
We don't get as much. We also had an active embassy program where we were dealing with the embassies, because, you know, there's a lot of people that live in our city that are embassy employees.
Yeah.
And also coming from the International Monetary Fund and those kinds of places, we had active, as an example, the Australian embassy, they would call us regularly to come in and train their people.
Okay. Now, in the discussion with Councilmember Fruman and some of your own discussions, something that's been mentioned that's not a surprise is capacity of your office. This is a hard city to live in, to afford. You're vulnerable because moving isn't that easy. There's not a lot of availability, particularly within particular price points or feelings of safety. So in an agency with limited capacity in a city with significant vulnerability, why prioritize resources to college students?
I'm focusing on them because they're a vulnerable group, and we have over 10 universities in the District of Columbia. I believe that we want to protect those students. We've had some horror stories in the past, but I believe that it's important for us to get to those first. Like I said, this is the first time they're writing a contract in their life, and their parents are usually paying that bill. Yeah. And that student is making that decision. We want to be there at the door just to give them that helping hand to ensure, as an example, Georgetown had 491 non-licensed landlords. Georgetown also had the history of one student dying in a fire in one of those places that didn't have a license. And so Georgetown came up with a piece on no lease, no license. And we still believe that as much effort as the government had put in to getting those homeowners to do the right thing, they hadn't done it.
Yeah.
So I see it as a liability to life and limb as well as to pocket.
Okay. I don't want anybody to think I don't care about college students. We have to ask, hard questions. If you prioritize somebody, you're deprioritizing somebody else. And so we've got to be conscious of that. Everybody can't be a priority.
I don't think we're deprioritizing anybody. We have a lease course,
Mhm.
which we offer on a monthly basis. So we do have a course that the general population can take, and it's also on our podcast.
Why not do one or two courses for college students virtually so that students from every university can attend at the same
We
time?
can do that also.
Okay.
We're not opposed to doing that.
I also think about, as I sort of look at these in real time, the majority, other than Trinity, I think all of our universities have law schools, and I think they could be playing a role here as well. And so I think our students have, it is still important, and I think you've clarified this, but I want to make sure we're not focusing on college students who tend to have more resources or could if we push their universities a bit more, versus folks who are living in, whatever neighborhood in the city who don't have the resources of a university.
Well, we can certainly, given your concerns about this, we can broaden our scope to not just include the student population, because we don't just include the student population, but in terms of a focal point of a SMART goal, something that's achievable in a short period of time, where I have the ability to know that once we get those students signing their leases, we know that those students may or may not have a lease for the next 2 years before they graduate. So we can make sure that we also include the same conversation for young people who are coming into the city and living in apartment complexes where we have students, tenant associations. We can offer this kind of help through the tenant associations too.
I like it. I like it. Is this, or will it be available on demand? Like, is there a website on your website where somebody can watch a training video?
Yeah, there's a podcast on it now,
Okay.
but I will also have the E&O group, because we've had 1 or 2 discussions about this already. So I'll talk to them and we'll add the other stuff.
Great.
Since you're concerned that we're not trying to leave anybody out. That would be the case.
That's right.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Um, um, how do you plan to get the word out about the clinics, whether they're in person or virtual?
I'm sorry,
How do you plan to get the word out so that as many students as possible know about the resource?
well, that's going to happen with the Consortium of Higher Education. We're going to have a meeting with all of the people that we know who run those programs at each one of the universities.
Okay, so they'll be responsible for getting the
Yeah,
word
they'll
out.
be
Okay.
responsible for that. And we're also reinstituting the no lease, no license. We're getting new buttons
Mhm.
on the no lease, no license, because I think that's important that students know before you even start talking about an application, do they have a license of their property? You don't want to live someplace that hasn't been inspected by the DC government.
Right.
I mean, we want to get that out. And, I mean, Joel and I were on Channel 7, it was a while back, but we were on Channel 7 a while back, and we had an opportunity to sort of talk about a lot of these things with them. We probably should see if that can happen again,
Yeah.
because they seem to be open to that kind of dialogue.
Yeah.
And before Donnie Simpson left 102.3, he's gone now.
Yeah.
And so their whole show has changed. So I don't think we've got a chance. DL Hughley is not really the type of person to run these sort of conversations through.
Yeah,
But you know, you never know.
that's right.
I mean, I did WHUR. I was at the TV station, so we might be able to get them to run a deal for us at Howard too.
I'm sure they
Yeah.
would. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a number of local news channels are supposed to do some community focused things other than, hey, here's all the bad stuff happening. They're supposed to
Yeah,
highlight some
right.
other things.
Well, now there's also a Channel 3. There's nothing but DC News. Do you know about that?
Let's say yes for the sake of this being on the record.
But no, there's a Channel 3, so maybe we can call Channel 3 and find out about us doing a story with them too.
Interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah.
gotta figure out who's on Channel 3. Is there, so as students learn about the leases and rental markets, most of them for the first time, is there a way for them or anybody else to report landlords who are attempting to lease without a license?
If there is, they would be reporting it to the Department of Buildings, not
I
to
guess
us.
that's right. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, that, you know, they're the enforcer of that,
Mm-hmm.
not me. So I don't know. I don't know if Brian has a hotline or something where you could call and say, you know, this place does, or call to, now they can call, when they call us, we will give them that number to call to find out if there is a license.
Right.
But I don't know what happens if they follow up and they find out. I don't know if DOB then takes that information and sends a gentle letter to, it's come to our attention, you know,
Yeah.
type thing. I don't know if they do that, which would be a good thing if they
Yeah.
did.
Get deterrent
Because I
effect.
don't believe there's ever been a public relations program
Mhm.
that deals with the whole issue of licensing, because you have too many people. Like in my neighborhood, you know, I've asked people, I said, before you answer the question, I can answer it for you. Do you have a basic business license? And they're renting that basement to a student. And I know that they don't have a BBL.
Note to everyone who lives near Johanna Shreve.
Yeah, that's in Crestwood.
That
That's Ward 4.
is. Yeah, students are living over there.
Lord, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but seriously, I mean, I think it's, I don't believe, since I've been in DC government, and speaking of that, you know, April the 18th is a special day for us because that was 18 years ago we started.
Hmm.
And then, just as now, I don't believe there's ever been a public relations campaign that tells people that if you want to rent, and there's nothing wrong with that, you have to have a license. I don't think the general public knows that
They
that
don't.
is a requirement.
They don't. Yeah. All right, let me move to the third goal. Submit draft legislation to the council requiring residential landlords to accept rent payment by check, notwithstanding an online portal payment requirement in the lease in some or perhaps all cases. Why is this a key priority?
Because it's a change in the way they're doing business now. I talked to my own staff about it who are renters. And privacy issues are a concern because they get certain information about their bank accounts. People are concerned about bank accounts being hacked. We see more and more complaints, not just from you know whom, but we see a lot of complaints coming to us now about people having to pay these fees. It's fine if you, Mr. Landlord, want to change the way you accept my money, but why do I need to be the one having to pay for that?
Right.
And so my lease doesn't tell me, there's nothing in my lease that says you now have an ACH account and you will pay only through that account. And as a result of that, in addition to the $2,750 you paying me in rent, you're gonna have an additional $3.50 or $6.50 a month that you have to kick in to pay for the portal charge. That's not the tenant's responsibility. That's an operational cost.
Right.
Why should tenants have to absorb that cost? Is it not enough that they're moving everything to the tenant side of the ledger?
Mhm. So this is something on our radar, and welcome any thoughts that you have. Um, I'm concerned with making it a key goal for the agency.
Why?
Well, I think it's going to get done or not get done, whether or not we get a recommendation, because it's been brought to our attention, and so it is just an issue of um, all
But
the
it's
other
also a tenant
emergencies.
protection that I'm required to deal with, so.
Right.
So it's sort of like a mixed bag, you know? I have a responsibility from a mandate, statutory mandate. So I just like if I talk to you, I had probably 5 different policy matters to bring to your attention today also as it related to utility charges.
Mhm.
This is a big one. And I'm sure you've heard about that too.
Yeah.
It's a real big one. And when I'm talking about the ledger being moved to where the tenants are now paying for the water in the common areas and all of that kind of stuff, why is that part of the dialogue for a tenant when it's not in the lease when they sign it?
Right.
These are things I think that the council has to look at. Another consideration is the whole issue of aging in place, where now we are seeing as it relates to emergency housing, when we get incidents, we are seeing tenants come in with memory loss. The hotel is not the place for those people.
Right.
And we get a call from the hotel, Mrs. So-and-so is walking out the door. She doesn't know where she's at. These are serious issues. And so from an economic development standpoint, when you're looking at that pipeline of what's being developed for the city, how much of it is relating to the population of people that we are not serving?
Hmm.
It's a major issue, council member. It's a
Yeah.
major issue.
It is.
And I don't know what to do. What am I going to do with these people?
Yeah.
So these are things that,
On the utility issue, um, how many complaints would you say roughly you get about the
this
utility
week
issue?
I had 25. I wanted to make sure that you asked me that question.
Excellent. Versus the electronic rent payment issue.
Well, I don't know if we talk about Mr. CB,
Hmm.
if we use his every day, that's
Yeah.
200 a month.
So that's what I
okay?
haven't, that's what I'm trying to figure out there is how prevalent, because I can reach out to his, landlord and work through it. But legislation and all the time legislation, takes, again, if you're doing something, you're not doing something else. So I don't know yet whether this is a widespread issue or one
Well,
with a couple.
I guess my response to you, council member, would be this. I would also take it to the other side of the conversation of me, and that would be to AOBA. I would ask them, what is the prevalence of your changing to this?
Mhm. Yeah.
Because you see, the thing that I worry about is what we're beginning to see now are all of these added fees.
Yeah.
Every time we turn around, it's another fee that the renter's got to pay.
Right.
Every time we turn around, and that is very troubling to me.
It is.
That we are seeing a shift in the ledger to the tenant side.
Yeah.
It's not enough that they're paying $3,000 a month for the 1-bedroom apartment.
Hmm.
Now you've got all of these other fees.
Yeah.
And what we also have seen is in the IZ community, we're seeing the fees go to the other side. And during an investigation, I found out that there was a deal that was made between one of our government agencies and that developer, that the cost of the utilities would be charged to those tenants. And the tenants, it was not in their lease.
So this is why my preference would be for you to prioritize the utility issue, because the increased utility is going to affect everybody
Okay.
in a building, whereas the electronic payment will really only affect the people who don't currently pay through electronic payment, which I think is probably relatively few. And
It
I
was
also,
one of our issues. It was
Okay.
just that it didn't make, we just used the other one as number 3 as a sort of a low-hanging fruit.
okay,
But certainly, the utility was one of our goals to deal with.
right.
So
Uh,
we'll take that off. And can I promise you that we'll send you an update then to the goal statement? We'll drop the telephone, but we'll put the utilities on.
Drop the electronic payment.
Yes.
Yeah, and put the utility. That'd be perfect.
Okay.
I would appreciate that.
So we'll change that about for you.
Thank
Not a
you.
problem.
Thank you. Want to just for a moment move away from the goals. The mayor is recommending a nearly 6% cut to your budget. We have worked hard over the years to staff you up. You shared in your pre-hearing responses that you expect these cuts to impact your MOU with DCHR, which you mentioned today as well. Your new office setup, we'll reach out to DGS on that because I think that's ridiculous. And your ability to have a printer, your annual tenant summit, annual report, funding for moving expenses, interpretation services, and other things. So those are the things that 6% cut is going to harm. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking operations here.
Mhm.
I'm just talking about basic operations. I'm not asking for a ball gown, to get to the promenade. I'm just asking for a replacement of some of the items that they took away from me to just do our daily bidding.
Yeah.
As an example, we had money in for supplies. They gave me $5,000 for 24 people. I don't think so. Not when you have a legal staff and educational and operations, and we're out in the community 400 events a year.
We'll get you bigger pens that hold more ink.
Stop it. Stop it. But does that pen cost $3?
It probably costs
if it
$6.
does, then I can't have it. But no, I mean, the things that they took from me,
Mm-hmm.
they're unlike some other agencies. I could probably find fat. I don't have it.
I hear you. The agency that developed this got fat. Let me tell you, it's one of my pet peeves. The annual tenant summit. How important is that to your work? You're out in the community a lot.
Yeah,
So
and every time
how
I-
important is the summit?
The summit's important to the tenants. They are asking me, I get accosted in grocery stores. Ms. Shreve, when you gonna have this summit, And so I think the bringing together is important. It has been very, very important for the tenants. And we started doing new things at the summits, like we do surveys and we'd have people voting right there on site about certain topics and issues.
Mhm.
I think that it's important for the tenants that are active to come together once a year. And of course, we know that the virtual world is here to stay. It's not going
That's right.
anyplace. And so what we hope to do in 24 as well in 25 is to have more of those virtual types of situations. But at the same time, we do need the ability to publicize our activities and to make sure that we're reaching the broader audience and bringing in new individuals to participate in what we're doing. I think that that's important. Just as we helped to set up a student tenant association at Georgetown, I'd like to see that happen on every campus.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's trying to make sure that we're empowering the people in the city in the broadest context that we possibly can.
Yeah.
And to let you know, on the 15th of this month, of April, we received a partnership award from the Red Cross this year for our work in emergency housing and disaster recovery.
Wow.
And 2 days ago, I received a call from the Deputy Secretary of State for the state of Maryland, because they now want to set up an office of the tenant advocate
Right.
and landlord issues. So we are people, we are the only one of our kind in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a question that was asked me about jurisdiction. There's no comparison. There's nobody I can compare us to, because we are it.
Mm-hmm.
People are looking to emulate what we do.
Yeah.
So I will be meeting with the state of Maryland on June the 4th at 1 o'clock. That time was set up today to bring them into the fold. And so we should be proud that we have something that other states want to emulate.
Yeah.
So, we get there each and every day, I think.
Yeah. I appreciate it. I mean, I'm glad other states are looking at it. But back to your previous point, if you're an agency that develops a reputation for not being able to answer the phone, then other states aren't looking at it because there's frustration. And so your ability to serve residents in a meaningful way means that you have to have the staffing capacity to do that. And small cuts here and there, it can have a substantial impact.
For us, it's like a razor. It cuts through to the core. And I do also want to say to you that in the rapid rehousing program, I read all of the materials that the chairman put out with regards to the proposed ideas of handling those 2,000 families. But I do want to tell you that as part of what we do, one of the more concerns that we in our office have been where they put those families.
Yeah.
Because they've been in squalid housing.
Mm-hmm.
There was a situation this past year where the entire property was rapid rehousing tenants. And I got a call from the Post because the reporter had talked to the tenants. They refused to go back to the property when the property was reopened because of the condition it was in when they moved into the property. So my job is to protect those tenants,
Yeah.
regardless of how they're funded.
Mm-hmm.
I still have a responsibility. And if there's a way that we can be involved in this resolution, I'd be happy to do it.
I appreciate it. We will take you up on that. It's a very complex issue, but you're right. In addition to some other things that are not working with this program, we've seen that as well when we visited people. We've gone to visit places based on issues of building conditions and found out once we were there that the tenants were rapid rehousing,
Yes.
or using the rapid rehousing program. And so what you're pointing to is absolutely happening on a broad scale.
Yes,
Um,
it is.
And then they're dumped out of the back end of that program.
That's exactly
and
correct.
Worse off than they started. Sorry. Interpretation services, the mayor's proposed budget includes a $10,000 cut to OTA's interpretation services. Is that right?
Yeah.
How many of your clients currently request interpretation or percentage roughly?
20%.
Wow. Do you know your total interpretation budget right
It
now?
was 25 grand.
Okay.
And that allowed us to deal with not only the interpretation for online stuff, but also all of the materials for our trainings and whatnot have to be translated into the other languages, which I believe are 7.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of materials that we have to provide in all languages for the entire community. So that's why it is a larger budget.
Okay. So I'm sorry, you are translating them now? Or you're,
We translate, yes, we maintain translated services for all of the required, because that's a requirement to the language access program.
yeah, it is. And yet,
Yes.
those are all the questions I have. I appreciate you and your team being with us, the work that you all do. What is the timeline for your move again?
They say well, I'm assuming that it's probably maybe gonna be the end of the year.
Okay.
I don't think it's gonna happen, by the end of September.
Mhm.
But then again, I don't know because I haven't even seen the site yet.
Ooh.
The other part is I'm still concerned because how does this coincide with the work that they're getting ready to do at Union Station? Okay,
We've been about to start that work for 15 years though, so.
well, I don't know, but my concern, council member, deals with when, mom and 5 kids show up at my office, the
Yeah.
confusion of getting to the office is gonna
Yeah.
be a consideration.
Uh,
So and so I'm very sensitive to all of that. I asked them to put us closer to the court, but they weren't having it. So I don't know. I don't know what I don't know, but what I do know is don't ask me to move and then tell me I got to pay for
right.
it.
Agreed.
That's what I do know.
Agreed. Well, thank you again. I appreciate you being with us and all the work that you and your team are doing. Those are all the questions we have today.
Thank you for having us.
Agent, yes, they're coming virtually. Yes. It's not my preference. It's not my preference. Same, same. Not that I don't miss our days of you being at home for these hearings and you're at home and I'm at my home and trying to make it work. Yeah.
Francesca, it's nice to meet you. I see your name, but I didn't know you until today.
You've been missing out.
This is back there.
We are resumed. I apologize for that brief recess. Had a emergency matter that we were attending to. But I want to thank DC Housing Finance Agency and then Director Donald and then his team for being with us today. Director Donald will be our third and final government witness today. Good afternoon, Director Donald.
Morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. As you know, it is the practice of this committee to put our government witnesses under oath, so I'll ask that you raise your right hand. Thank you. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide to the Committee on Housing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Excellent. Thank you so much. You can begin your testimony.
Morning, Chairperson White and members of the Committee on Housing. My name is Christopher E. Donald, and I am the Executive Director and CEO of the District of Columbia Housing Finance Agency. And here with me today from the agency is Steve Clinton, my CFO. On behalf of our Board of Directors and the agency staff, thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee to testify at this fiscal year 2024-2025 budget oversight hearing. In February, I appeared before your committee to share the agency's performance for FY 2023 and the first quarter of FY 2024. In March, the agency celebrated 45 years of service to the residents of the District of Columbia. DCHFA was chartered as an instrumentality of the government in 1979 by the Council of the District of Columbia. The agency is entirely self-supporting, and by statute, the agency's budget is independent of the District of Columbia's government executive branch. None of its proposed budget funds are derived from the district government's revenues, nor does DCHFA utilize district government full-time employees. It's worth noting that the agency's budget and staffing have remained consistent year after year. As a result, we are a steady agency that produces consistently high results across different economic scenarios, and we do not fluctuate as volume changes. As such, in April of 2024, Standard & Poor's S&P upgraded DCHFA's credit rating from A+ to AA-, citing financial strength, strong management team, and board members with a track record of adapting the agency's programs through strategic initiatives that increase the agency's asset base. I will highlight the three primary areas of business that we have been charged with performing. First, DCHFA creates home ownership opportunities in the district through the implementation of several agency-sponsored programs that provide low-cost, single-family home mortgages and down payment assistance, made possible through the issuance of mortgage-backed securities. The agency is also a co-administrator for the Home Purchase Program Assistance Program, funded by the DC Department of Housing and Community Development. These programs help to promote and preserve home ownership. These programs bring down payment assistance and competitive mortgage rates to first-time home buyers and ensure that these new home buyers are prepared to be successful homeowners. Second, the agency issues tax-exempt bonds to fund the acquisition, construction, and preservation of affordable multifamily rental housing, more commonly known as apartment buildings. The agency also provides bridge loans to pay for the pre-development of projects using the McKinney Act loan program. Finally, over the last 6 years, the agency has made a direct investment into building for-sale housing for the missing middle through its housing investment platform, also known as HIP. It is through the implementation of these designated tasks that we serve the residents of the District of Columbia to ensure that they have home ownership opportunities and live in communities which provide beautiful, healthy, and affordable homes. The agency's proposed FY 2025 budget of approximately $16.9 million will allow DCHFA to implement its business plan objectives throughout the fiscal year. The proposed budget is slightly higher than FY 24 and accounts for minor increases in personnel costs. We are oftentimes asked what we do with our resources. Here's a snapshot of how the agency leverages its balance sheet for the residents of the District of Columbia. 10% of our balance sheet supports the HPAP program. The agency currently has almost $20 million in bridge financing outstanding to facilitate HPAP loans. 10.3% of our balance sheet is dedicated to programs for emerging developers, which includes $5 million for a HIP program and $15 million for a new emerging developer fund. 16.5% of our balance sheet is used for single-family mortgages, $7 million in down payment assistance loans, and $25 million in a single-family mortgage indenture. And 4% of our balance sheet is used for pre-development loans, or about $8 million in total capacity for McKinney Act loans. Finally, we have about $600 million of bonds outstanding, of which $200 million are in our risk share program, which we co-insure with HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. If these loans fail, the agency will have to step in to make them whole. It is also worth noting that programs like Risk Share enabled us to return $2 million of housing production trust funds several years ago, because in that interest rate environment, we were able to increase the permanent debt and reduce the amount of debt that the city had to contribute from its resources. DCHFA also works in partnership with the district's housing agencies to achieve economic diversity and the income strata it serves. Single-family programs focus primarily on borrowers earning between 80% to 80% of area median income. The tax-exempt bond program serves residents up to 60% of area median income, and our HIP program serves future homeowners between 60 to 120% of area median income. DCHFA's single-family programs division creates homeownership opportunities in the district by providing low-cost single-family mortgages and down payment assistance made possible through the issuance of mortgage-backed securities. DCHFA's flagship homeownership resource, DC Open Doors, makes homeownership in Washington, D.C. affordable by offering qualified buyers home purchase loans, down payment, and closing cost assistance. From the start of FY 2024 to date, 53 First Trust mortgage loans in the amount of $15 million have been funded via the Open Doors program. As shared earlier, DCHFA is also a co-administrator of the HPAP program. Last fiscal year, DCHFA closed 304 HPAP loans for the first-time home buyers for a total of $43 million. In FY 2024, DCHFA has funded 179 HPAP loans amounting to $20 million. The agency is on track to restart the reverse mortgage foreclosure prevention pilot program, referred to as REMIT, and supports the legislation to make the program permanent. The agency will continue to administer programs that promote and preserve homeownership. The largest impact on our ability to increase the number of multifamily dwelling units for low and moderate income residents is our tax-exempt bond cap allocation program. In FY 2023, DCHFA issued $682 million in bond financing for the development of 2,600 affordable housing units. On December 1st, 2023, DCHFA closed its first affordable housing investment of FY 2024 with the issuance of $60 million in tax-exempt bonds and underwrote $45 million in federal low-income housing tax credits and $9 million in district low-income housing tax credits for the construction of the Edgewood Commons 5 apartments. The new Ward 5 senior community will consist of 151 units. We are on track to use all of our bond cap this year, which is currently $300 million outstanding. In addition to bond issuance, as of April 2024, the agency had $1.8 million outstanding in McKinney Act loans. As I shared previously, one of the concerning issues we are seeing in the rental housing market is delinquency. Although the agency's receivables are showing no delinquency, i.e. people are paying their mortgages on time, some of the properties financed with DCHFA bonds are displaying signs of stress in terms of rental delinquencies. Rental payment delinquency is currently higher than historical trends. Delinquency is defined as at least 30 days of being behind and paying rent. However, when we are analyzing delinquency and we look at rent receivables at least 90 days or more, we only look at rent receivables that are at least 90 days or more. The numbers show that severe delinquency is at least 2 times higher than normal. When the agency surveyed its portfolio 18 months ago, it found that 12% of residents were responsible for about 80% of the delinquency. The high delinquency is concentrated amongst a small group of people. When delinquency levels are this high, it impedes the operator's ability to pay critical expenses like security, immediate unit repairs, and the appropriate property management staff levels. Ultimately, these diminished resources contribute to properties deteriorating faster. DCHFA has continued to monitor the situation and convene discussions with sponsors and lenders to identify solutions to ameliorate the distress. Lastly, in 2017, DCHFA established the Housing Investment Platform as a resource for innovative investments that will increase the agency's support of the District of Columbia's housing market. HIP's Single Family Investment Fund provides joint venture capital to emerging developers for the creation of for-sale workforce housing in the district. In addition, the program fosters neighborhood stabilization and increases the tax base, while the projects create employment opportunities through the construction of new homes. The HIP program currently has $1.5 million in capital distributed to development partners, and HIP's pipeline has grown to about 100 units. The proposed FY 2025 budget will allow the agency to continue to function at similar levels of volume as we have done in the last few years. While DCHFA is an independent agency, the board of directors, the staff, and I are fully committed to work with and in collaboration with Mayor Bowser, the council, and our governmental housing partners to advance the housing priorities of the District of Columbia. I'd like to take the moment to recognize my CFO, Mr. Clinton, and his staff for all of their work on the proposed budget, as well as the entire team for their dedication to our agency. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the Committee on Housing and present this information about the work of our agency, and more specifically, our proposed budget for FY 2025. This concludes my testimony, and I now welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Director Donald. Let me go right into goals, and really appreciate you and your team getting those to us. So your first goal is to close $300 million of bond capital in the multifamily division to be completed by Q4 of fiscal year 25. How much bond capital have you closed so far this fiscal year?
So as I mentioned earlier in the testimony, we've closed one deal to date, and that was the Edgewood 5 deal.
And how much bond capital does that represent?
That was about $56 million.
Okay. And what's in the pipeline for the remainder of this fiscal year?
So in the pipeline for the remainder of this fiscal year, and that's the pipeline, Mr. Chair, that we share with you all, I believe, on a weekly basis, there are roughly, about approximately 10 to 15 more transactions in that pipeline that are to be closed. They'll probably close across the calendar as opposed to the entire fiscal year, because as you know, the bond cap is allocated on a calendar year.
And how much bond capital do you normally expend per year?
Usually in the $300 to $350 million. And again, that's because things kind of ebb and flow, right?
Yeah.
And depending on how you cut it, if you're looking at the fiscal versus the calendar year, that number can change. But I'd say, a solid number somewhere around $300 million of production.
Okay. And based on what you've done this fiscal year and what you are projecting to do, about how many affordable housing units will that equate to?
So it'll equate to probably somewhere around 1,200 to 1,300 total units in production.
Okay. And do you foresee any barriers in getting the $300 million out the door next year?
No, I don't. Given the competitive process now for bond cap, that has kept deals moving at a steady and consistent pace.
Is there anything we can do more of to support multifamily housing?
Look, the city and the mayor have made an extraordinary commitment to the production of affordable housing. and everything that you're doing is everything that we're working in tandem to support. So we take it as you give it. We have incredible resources at our disposal right now, and we will continue to produce housing with those resources.
To get to something I think you were pointing to in your testimony, your responses to the committee pre-hearing questions indicated that you have over $139 million in unrestricted assets after accounting for liabilities. Is that right?
Correct. That's correct.
Thank you. And that's Mr. Clinton?
Yes.
Excellent. Good to see you. It's more for the
Thank you. Good to see you.
And so I understand, I think we discussed some of this in the performance oversight hearing. You've been utilizing some of your surplus funds over the years for things like grants to community organizations and scholarships. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. How much do you spend roughly every fiscal year on grants and scholarships?
Let's say it's probably around 400 to 500,000.
Are there ways your unrestricted assets could be utilized differently to advance affordable housing goals?
So one of the things that we talked about, Mr. Chair, is what we're doing with all those resources right now. And so if you look at our balance sheet, when I listed off what we're doing with our money, about 40% of our balance sheet is being used to advance the mission of the organization. But when you zoom out a little bit, our balance sheet has changed quite a bit over the last, call it 8 years that I've been at the agency. And part of the vision was we wanted to build up the balance sheet so that we could do things like other progressive agencies with resources in the HFA world. And those are namely places like Mass Housing in Massachusetts or HDC in New York City. And what they have the ability to do with their indenture and their balance sheet is they can fund loans directly. We're not at that level right now. And so while it may appear that we have a number of resources, when you look at it relative to what we need to finance in the district, it's only a small portion, right? So when we talk about that $300 million of bond cap that's going out, that supports about $1 billion worth of development on an annual basis, right? And if you look to our resources and you compare those resources relative to what it takes to get a transaction done in the district, your average HBTF award, and I'm looking at this based on the production that we've done here at the agency, so not across every transaction that's funded by HBTF, but the bond funded transactions utilizing HBTF, you're looking at an average of $20 to $25 million HBTF award to finance a typical bond deal, right? And so over the long term, what we're trying to do, and this is reflected in the enhancement of our bond rating over time, is to grow our resources. So for example, in a place like New York City, they can go into their indenture and they can issue sub-loans through their indenture to support projects. We don't have enough resources to do that right now. If we start to do that, then it then impacts the amount of money that we have on our balance sheet, and the amount of capital that we have on that balance sheet directly impacts our bond rating, right?
About how much money would you need in order to fund loans or sub-loans directly?
That's something that we would need to look at and be able to come back to you to talk about. And here's why I say that, Mr. Chair. It's going to be a function of what our financial advisor tells us. So our Kane Mitter, who we work with, they're going to look at our balance sheet, look at what we're doing with our balance sheet, the types of activities that we're currently involved in, right? And so, the question becomes, how much could we do? So sure, if I came back to you with a number, I could give you a number, but then the question becomes, how many deals does that really support and at what level, right? So I would say, let's just, for the sake of this conversation, say it's $5 million. Well, if I've got 10 deals that we're looking at every year, then we're talking about $500,000. If my average deal size is somewhere between $40 to $50 million, does that really move the needle? Right. Every dollar matters, right? I would rather be having a conversation with you where I say, look, we're in a position now and our balance sheet is strong enough that we can come in with $5 to $10 million over a number of different deals. And I'm not there, right? If we start talking about working at that order of magnitude, right, that means I might be able to do one deal. That's not clear to me. And then how do you choose that deal? How do you really have impact, right? And so the goal is to get to a point where we can complement all of the other resources that are in the ecosystem. And we're not there yet. We're in the middle of the story or the journey where we can build up the muscles, right? And the financial fortitude to be able to have impact. And it's just going to take a while.
So is it your goal to build up this fund in order to start to do direct loans?
Ultimately, our long-term goal is to bolster everything that the city is doing, right? And so you look at that strategy, as I mentioned, with our risk share program, the ability to be able to leverage these resources to amplify the impact of the mayor's goals and prerogatives and of the council's goals and prerogatives, right? But the level at which we're playing is significant. These are not little numbers that we're talking about. And so again, if you look at our production level and the amount of money that the city has invested into the system, right? It's going to take a lot more for us to be able to play at that level. And you're talking about, if you're looking at, the New Yorks and the Massachusetts, billions of dollars, right? Not $100 million. You're at a much higher level to be able to contribute in a substantive way. And so part of what I would say is let us go back, talk with our financial advisor, and then come back to you and tell you what that looks like.
But Mr. Chair, just to clarify, we do already make direct loans in the single family space through our second trust, the down payment assistance program, through our McKinney pre-development program, through our HIP program. So we are making direct loans already. The question would be what more can we do down the road? And the stronger we are financially, the more options it creates. And just as a note, the stronger we are financially, that impacts the bond ratings on each deal and on the agency, which has an indirect effect of lowering interest rates to our developers, which has an indirect effect of potentially making more units.
Right.
Okay, so what I'm trying to understand here is, so there's $130 million in unrestricted assets. There's a notion that sort of having that money, that cushion impacts, benefits your bond rating. There's also a notion that maybe one day you will do more and more substantial direct loans. But it doesn't seem like it's clear today what the ultimate goal of those unrestricted assets are. Well,
Again, just to take a step back for a moment, right? So as I said, 40% of our balance sheet today is actually activated. And we kind of walk through what those things are. So for example, we've got the $8 million and the McKinney Act Loan Fund. Those are direct loans that go out today to support pre-development efforts for the pipeline, right? We've got $5 million in HIP, which is being utilized today, that helps to produce those single family homes for the infill that are being sold. We've got a $250 million bond indenture today that supports, I believe that's roughly how many units? About
Several thousand.
Several thousand units that exist today. So it's not so much that we have these dollars and they're sitting there and they're not working. Those dollars are actually working to support all of the work that we have going on today. So in order for us to be able to be at the rating that we are at today, that's based on those dollars being on our balance sheet.
So the McKinney Act, the single family, and the $250 million in bond money, that is part of or separate from the unrestricted assets?
Part of.
Part of. Okay. In previous fiscal years, Events DC found itself with a large surplus and contributed funds to other city needs. Have you considered something like that?
We have not.
Say more.
It's just not, it's not a conversation that we've engaged in, sir. You know, part of, I think there's a significant difference between us and Events DC. You know, our primary goal is, our primary mission is around housing, right? So all of the work that we're doing is in advancing that goal. A part of what we're working on right now is our strategic plan for single-family home ownership, and in the wake of the Black home ownership strike force, right? And so we are working on a mortgage that responds to how do we increase Black home ownership, and developing a special purpose credit program. That's part of what we're looking at, utilizing the resources that we have to do. So for example, if we say that the average mortgage that we're seeing in our business is, for our DC Open Doors program, about $363,000. If we wanted to originate 100 of those mortgages, that's about $36 million, right? If we're going to do that and structure these mortgages so that we can get them to people who have not ordinarily had a chance, or who have been aggrieved by the financial system, then we may have to self-fund them, meaning that we don't go to the markets initially to raise the money to fund these mortgages, but that we fund them off of our balance sheet, right? So we are in the process of designing that program right now. In order to launch something like that, we need to have the resources to be able to do that. But again, there's going to be a certain breaking point at which we can't utilize the capital on our balance sheet. We have to leave so much capital on the balance sheet that is not allocated towards a program in order to maintain that rating. And that's the biggest thing that you'll hear us talk about, is we've been able to increase our bond rating, our credit rating, over the last 6 years twice. That's fairly significant. It's not something that typically happens. And that's done primarily because the agency has been predictable and it's been consistent, right? The moment we stop being predictable and consistent, that damages our rating, that damages our ability to access the capital markets in such a way that we can be a good partner.
Right.
So when you ask, you know, what are we thinking about as it relates to the capital on our balance sheet? What we're thinking about is, how do we expand the programs that we have right now to do more, to complement the efforts that are already going on? And then number two, it is that longer term goal that we set out to start building on back in 2018 when we launched the risk share program. We knew that it was going to take time to do it, and we're in the middle of that journey, not quite where we want to be yet. So we don't have the ability to do a whole lot more.
Okay. What's the seal of good approval or best practices with respect to contingency cash for credit rating agencies? What are they looking for you to have?
It's opaque, but the rating agencies don't want to tell you exactly what that formula is. So they constantly review your financial statements and they make ratings, they ask questions. So they're not going to tell us you need to have X and you'll get a Y rating. So it's a little bit of judgment on our part by looking at their past history and so on and so forth. So we don't know exactly the number we need to have to show that our ratings will stay strong or grow. We have a sense of it by observing behavior, but it's not a black and white type of thing.
All right. Related to multifamily housing, you noted that some of the properties financed with HFA bonds are showing signs of distress because of rental payment delinquencies. What's happening in the rental payment delinquency? Well, I guess what steps are you taking, or do you need to take, or does the council need to take in response to the delinquency issue that you raised in your testimony?
So that's a great question. And I'm almost certain that you've heard from our borrowers directly as well. It is a complicated issue. And, you know, you spoke about that with my colleague immediately preceding me. The challenge is that there was distress, you know, clearly before the pandemic, but it was at manageable levels. Everybody knew how to navigate their way through it. And then the pandemic came, and there was distress across the market, across income levels. And as we moved through that pandemic, there was relief provided. The immediate distress was ameliorated. So we had the HSG grants, which were the kind of the first wave of subsidy. And then you had subsequent rental subsidy rounds. During the course of that time, what we began to see was that there was a small group of residents who were chronically delinquent. And that delinquency would get cleared out, and then it would run back up, and it get cleared out again, and then it would run back up and get cleared out again. And so there's a very small group who are contributing to delinquency. And so when you ask me what needs to happen, it's a challenging question to answer, right? Some of it is policy, some of it is enforcement. What we're doing on our side is we're monitoring the situation. We're trying to see what it's going to take for these properties to be healthy. You know, simply making the delinquency go away is not solving the problem, because that's what we've been doing. And I'm not being direct here, council member, not because I'm trying to hide from the question, but simply because I don't know what the right answer is.
Yeah, no,
Right.
that's fair. I don't either. Do you expect that DCHFA will have to step in to assist these properties, given the delinquency issues you outlined?
I don't know yet. As I said, property owners right now, when we talk to them, are deeply concerned. They're concerned because they're feeding the animal. What I can tell you is that this is not sustainable long-term. This will not work in perpetuity forever, right? What we are looking at doing is, if there's a need for assistance to be given, how could we structure debt in such a way that it would give some kind of relief, right? Those are the things that we're talking to our borrowers about right now, right? And that's all very conceptual. But we would be looking on the mortgage side, if you got an older mortgage, could that mortgage be restructured so that the debt payments could be lowered, so that it would give operators more breathing room because they need less cash flow in order to service that debt. That would be a way that we could step in that would be appropriate for our role, right? And again, this is a situation where you're talking about indebtedness of several hundred millions of dollars across any number of different projects, right? And having the ability to be able to access the bond market to issue that debt, and then to potentially come in with some other softer debt from our own resources that would give room is the type of role that we would need to be able to play. And we've got to have the resources to do that.
Let me move to the second goal, complete single family strategic plan by Q1 of fiscal year 25. By itself, this isn't a SMART goal, but it could be important to help establish a goal. How do you define DCHFA's mission in the single family space?
So our global mission is to provide the most efficient form of capital available in order to provide housing, both on the for sale side and on the rental side. Our mission on the single family side, and our focus really is on how we give people the ability to buy and own their homes affordably and sustainably, right? How do we make sure that once people buy that home, they can stay in that home? The reason that we're doing a strategic plan for our single family business right now is to understand how we can do more, right? And really also understanding what the market needs now. Pardon me. We've had a relatively successful program through Open Doors. Now that we've had that success and we've built up some resources, we're looking at how we expand that. So again, pardon me. When we talk about what we're doing, it's necessary for us to look at the successes we've had and then look at how we can expand them. So we're surveying our past borrowers. We are talking to our lending partners who actually utilize our products, right? Because we don't lend directly. We work with different banks and mortgage brokers who sell our products to borrowers. So trying to learn about what's needed. We know that we're in an increasing interest rate environment. How are we going to make it more affordable for our residents to continue to be able to buy even in this context, and increase home ownership overall? And then finally, as I said a few moments ago, really focused on Black home ownership and what kind of impact we can have on increasing that in the district, particularly as things change, wanting to make sure that long-term residents of the District of Columbia have an opportunity to remain in the city.
No, let me come back to that. What prompted the need for the single family strategic plan?
What prompted the need is that we hadn't had one in quite some time, right? And again, looking at everything that was going on in the space and saying, hey, if we want to have more impact, let's look at what we're doing and how we might be able to do it smarter or better.
And how will the strategic plan advance those outcomes?
Yeah, so number one, we're looking at our Open Doors program, as a co-administrator of the ACEPAT program. Are there better ways that we could partner those two programs together to make it more beneficial for our borrowers? If we're talking about Black home ownership, are there certain places in the marketplace that we could be more effective than others, right? So we have historically been focused at 80% of AMI or lower, right? Is 80% of AMI the sweet spot? Is it 90%? Is it 65%, right? Doing the analytics on that and looking at, where's the greatest opportunity to provide the most leverage to make sure that more people can participate really exist at. And so that takes some analysis and digging into what we've done.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just add, on a national level, the single-family mortgage market is significantly down over the last couple of years due to interest rates. And so most mortgage companies, mortgage lenders are asking these questions of themselves. How can I do things better, different, stronger? So this review, so to speak, is very common in the industry because overall volume is down significantly.
Very true. What I worry about with strategic plans, I think they're very necessary. You need to know where you're going if you're going to get there. In the city, often agencies will create strategic plans and they're like, mission accomplished. We created a strategic plan. They don't do no systems, no goals, no strategies, nothing to get to them. And guess what? They don't get to them. So we had a hearing with DHS a few weeks ago. They have a strategic plan to end youth homelessness. Since they wrote that plan, there's more youth homelessness. And so how will you, when you develop the strategic plan, how will you measure success as you go?
So there's two parts to this right now in terms of what we're looking at with our single family business. We've got the strategic plan overall, and then we've got the special purpose credit program, which I mentioned earlier, which is focused on how do we increase Black home ownership. And so at the end of the day, we're going to look at where we're performing today in terms of the number of loans that we've been able to originate, and then some marginal increase over that level. And so there will be actual metrics and numbers that define what we look at as success. So, for example, we are typically seeing, I'd say, 100 to 200 loans, depending on where interest rates are coming through our Open Doors program, right? And one of those metrics might be at the end of the study, we want to increase the number of loans we do by 50% or by 100%. So instead of doing 100 every year, we want to be doing 150 or 200 of those loans, right? Some of the more qualitative measurements may be, we want to see the borrowers be able to develop X number of dollars in equity in their homes over the first 5, 10, or 15 years. So there's some real metrics that we have in mind from the outset about what success is going to look like. And it's not simply the act of going through and creating yet another plan, but instead saying, we know that we do 100 loans every year. We want to do 200 loans every year. We know that instead of it taking 20 years for somebody to develop $100,000 worth of equity in their home, we want to see if we can do that in 10 years. That is the way that we're going into the strategic plan, with the goal of coming up with some solutions on the backside to achieve those metrics.
I love, so you plan to include metrics in the strategic plan?
Yes, sir.
Great, great, great. And what process are you using to develop your strategic plan?
We have a third-party consultant who we've engaged in a team that they're bringing along with them. So CSG is who we're working with. They're one of our financial advisors. They've also worked with other housing agencies in the housing ecosystem for the district and across the country. In addition, we've got the Home Ownership Coalition of America, and we've got the National Bankers Association, which represents minority depository institutions across the country. And so we brought together some organizations which have national perspectives to look at what we're doing here and how we can be very thoughtful in assisting the residents of the district.
That's great. Of those entities, though, who has expertise in developing strategic plans? So
CSG.
They do? Okay, excellent.
Yes.
At DHCD's hearing last week, DHCD noted that they are working to tighten up the timeline for HPAP loan administration. We've heard from HPAP participants about delays in the process and having to resubmit documents several times. As one of the HPAP administrators, you're responsible for processing the paperwork and getting deals to closing. What do you think is causing delays in HPAP?
It's Mr. Chair, it's a very nuanced process, but I will acknowledge your point that it's taking too long. And both we and DHCD need to work with each other to shorten that time period. As we noted, we're leveraging our balance sheet due to that delay. And in theory, that locks up that money that we could be using elsewhere. So there's lots of nuances that probably not best to go through here that could improve that process, and we're working with our partners to do so.
Could you talk about maybe a couple of the more impactful nuances?
Well, the core process is we have a budget. We then create loans. DHCD needs to approve those loans. They physically review that or electronically review all the loans, and then they send them for processing to payment. There's systems, portals, exchange of information. So there's a two-part: look at the loans, make sure that we have done our part and made loans to the appropriate people. There's a second part of processing the money transfer, and both of those get slowed down.
So if I needed a breakdown on the average time for each of the steps, would that come from you or from DHCD?
Both. We could help you provide that, but both of us should respond to that.
And that's something we can come back to you on after the hearing. Mr. Chair, my single family person is not here with us today, but we could take that question back and get more information for you.
I'd be grateful for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Have you made any changes to how you manage HPAP over the last year?
I would say no significant changes, no. But it's been a robust program and it's kept us and DHC busy. The numbers we articulated earlier are very large, and that keeps everybody busy.
Director, did you just reference a senior vice president of single family programs? Is someone in that position now?
No, we have our director of single family right now, Ms. Tykesha Wilson is
Okay,
still
yes.
there on an interim basis. We have not hired a new SVP yet.
Okay. Do you expect to fill that position?
We absolutely do. We are actively reviewing resumes for the position right now.
Let me move to the third goal, final goal. Establish a mentorship program for emerging developers and launch a pre-development fund to be completed by Q2 of fiscal year 25. What would a successful mentorship program accomplish?
Sure. So when we look at HIP has been really successful in terms of providing infill housing, right? But one of the things that we understand is if we want to do more, we have to have more participants in the program. If we want more participants in the program, then we've got to expand the pipeline, right? One of the questions that council members oftentimes ask, well, it seems like we're looking at the same folks, right? Well, in order to not be looking at the same folks, you're going to have to reach deeper down into the pool to help develop newer talent, right? And so, for example, we're working on creating a platform where someone who may have only done one deal gets partnered with someone who's done 10 deals as a mentor, right? You simplify the type of project that they can work on, you give them the capital to successfully complete that project, and then they're able to build the muscles to do bigger projects over time, right? So when we talk about building a mentorship program, that's what we're talking about doing, which is getting newer talent, providing that newer talent with an opportunity and with the capital, or they can bring their own opportunity, and giving them the capital, giving them the technical expertise so they can successfully work their way through the project, and then letting them get as many reps as possible so that they can move up to the next level. So that's what we're talking about when we're saying we're going to develop a mentorship program.
And how do you, what does success look like? Is it the number of people in the program? Is it the number of deals they do after the program? What does success of a mentorship program look like?
So that's a great question, right? And what success is going to look like, and we've got to figure out what this number is that we create, call it X number of companies that can successfully complete 2 to 3 deals over, call it a 2 to 3 year time period, right? And then another smaller subset of that group that's going to be able to successfully sustain itself as an ongoing business for the next 3 to 5 years, right? And then another subset of that group that's going to be sustainable 5 years and beyond. In addition to kind of these ongoing entities, we'll also have some goals around the actual production. So in theory, each one of these developers should be able to produce, call it 1 to 5 for sale units, if we're looking simply on the for sale side. So those are kind of metrics that we're going to be looking at building out in order to define what success looks like. It'll clearly be number of units, and we'll also be looking at the sustainability of the businesses over time.
Okay, and there's a pre-development fund associated with the mentorship program, or will be?
No, so we created a fund, and we talked about this, a pre-development fund, about a year ago, but we're still designing the metrics of those funds, of that fund, that need to be finalized and approved by our board, right? So that will go hand in hand with the fund. It's not, we're waiting on the program to create the fund, or vice versa. They'll work in tandem together.
Okay. And do you measure return on investment across your programs to figure out where money will have the biggest impact?
Yes, we do, but we are also looking at that return on investment as well as a return on mission, right? So if you look at our HIP program, we've had return goals which are middling single digits, but the flip side of it is we're also looking at targeting families between 60 to 120% of AMI. So if the house that they're buying is affordable at that level, then that's a part of our return, right? as opposed to just saying a sheer numerical return, which is we're looking for low double-digit return of X on the investment that we're making. We're saying, no, we want our money back, number one. We want our money back with a return, number two, but we want our money back with a return in service of people earning between 60 to 120% of AMI who are long-term district residents who are able to remain here in the district, buy a home, and be a part of this community.
Okay. Going back a step, the pre-development fund, you are working out that program with your board now. Is that
No,
right?
staff is working through the program, and we'll need to take it back to the board in order for the board to approve it and ratify.
Okay. And what's the timeline for that?
I need to go back and look at that. Let me come back to you on that,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, with our timeline on that.
Okay, I appreciate it. And you've mentioned a number of times Black home ownership. What specifically are you thinking or aiming to do around that?
Well, the question is, and the Black home ownership strike force, one of the ending goals was 20,000 new Black home owners by 2030, right? And so the question becomes, how can we assist with that goal? When we look at both our Open Doors program and the HPAP program, they directly impact Black home ownership, right? So what do we need to do to increase the number of participants that we work with in those programs and help them successfully become homeowners? And so that's the lens through which we're looking at this, that in conjunction with our strategic plan, which is going to shed some light on the path, and at looking at programs like a special purpose credit program, which could allow us to create a place-based program that could increase Black home ownership are the things that we're looking at.
Okay. So do you plan to formalize any of the efforts around Black home ownership?
When you say formalize, help me to understand what you mean.
So HPAP is a program that exists. DC Open Doors is a program that exists, and they exist whether or not we have any specific goals around Black home ownership. And so when we as a city talk about Black home ownership, my hope is that we will do it with some specificity so that we know how we are planning to increase the number of Black homeowners. And so, for example, and this is one of the reasons I think goals and metrics are so important, HPAP, the average user of HPAP is a middle-aged Black woman. And when we when HPAP becomes oversubscribed and the administration decides, well, we are going to increase the amount of down payment people need to be able to make in order to use HPAP, chances are you're cutting out Black people from that program. So I want to be clear as we are talking about Black home ownership that we are seizing the opportunity to make clear and specific progress there. And that's easier said than done, but we can't analyze how well we've done in this without being clear about what specifically we are doing to increase Black home ownership and how we're measuring our work as we go.
And so, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I'm clear. So you're asking us in terms of how we're thinking about this, how that's overlaying with what's currently going on. Is that your question to me?
Well, you mentioned Black home ownership as a priority maybe about half a dozen times.
Yep.
And I'm wondering if at any point you will formalize what programs or changes to programs you're recommending to achieve the goal of Black home ownership.
Sure, and just to be clear, part of what we're looking at is the resources that we have leadership over, which is our DC Open Doors program, right? We are a co-administrator of the HPAP program and work hand in hand with the Department of Housing and Community Development, right? And so we will follow their lead. We'll share the intel and the analysis that we're seeing, but we'll really look to them to kind of talk about where the policy is. By and large, what's driving it from our perspective, or from our side, we're going to be looking at the metrics of where those numbers are today and where we want them to go and how do we drive them up. When we talk about the profile of the typical borrower, the typical borrower for us is not much different than it is for HPAP on the open doors side. But I think this gets to a conversation we have oftentimes, Mr. Chair. We don't drive the policy, we are implementers, right? We're going to facilitate the overarching policy, and that overarching policy, I think, again, came in the form of the Black Homeownership Strike Force and the overarching goal of 20,000 new Black homeowners. And so the urgency and the focus that you hear from me is on reaching that goal. And so we're not going to set the policy per se. We're going to do the research and see what the numbers tell us, and we'll come back and share that and then work towards achieving those numbers.
Okay. Well, I hope you do, and we'll see yourselves as advisors on the policy, not just implementers of the policy, because folks don't always get it right. I hope you will advise the agencies that you're working with as well toward the shared goals.
We will be good partners and share everything that we find, Mr. Chair. We are always willing to do that. But we are also very respectful of our role in the ecosystem.
Right. Well, I don't know. We have too many shots to make progress with Black people, so I don't want people to be too polite. Right? Like we gotta challenge each other out of love, because I think we're aiming for the right things, aiming for the same things, and so we have to be able to challenge each other. I appreciate you, Director and Mr. Clinton, for being with us, and the rest of the team who, if not in the room with you, are in the agency doing work. I appreciate what you all do. It is a lot, and it is incredibly important to the city and to our housing ecosystem. So those are all the questions I have, and I want to thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you.
I want to thank as well all of our public witnesses and all the members of the public who have tuned in as we close. If anyone is interested in keeping up with this committee's work and finding ways to get involved, please sign up at robertwhiteatlarge.com so we can be in touch with updates. The record for this hearing will be held open until the close of business on Wednesday, May 8th at 5:30 p.m. Anyone who is interested in submitting written testimony for the official record can do so through the council's hearing management system at lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings. That is LIM as in Michael s.dccouncil.gov/hearings. The business before this committee is finished for today. The time is 12:45 p.m. and this budget oversight hearing is adjourned.